Hello there, and welcome to History for Lunatics. I'm so glad you're here tonight. Pull up something comfortable, maybe a blanket, maybe a pillow, maybe a warm drink you'll forget about until it has gone a little cold beside you. Tonight we're going somewhere quiet, but not peaceful. Somewhere ordinary, but not safe. We're not going to a battlefield, not to a courtroom, not to the deck of a ship crossing the Atlantic in bad weather. We're going into a small colonial home in the year 1690, at an hour when the fire is low, the floorboards are cold, the house smells of smoke and wool and damp earth, and somewhere inside that house, a woman has just realised that her labour has begun. And I want to be careful with you from the very beginning, because this is not a story about kings, laws, dates, or grand events that change the map. This is a story about the kind of history that happened in beds, on straw mattresses, beside hearths, in rooms where no one was writing anything down because everyone was too busy trying to survive the night. The topic tonight is birth in colonial America. Not the softened version, not the version with clean sheets, calm music, trained nurses, bright lights, sterile gloves, monitors, pain medicine, and someone telling you exactly what is happening. We're talking about childbirth in 1690, when there was no reliable pain relief, no real understanding of infection, no emergency surgery in the way we understand it, no blood transfusion, no antibiotics, no fetal monitoring, no modern hospital waiting at the end of the road, and often no road that could be safely travelled after dark. A birth in this world was not treated like a medical appointment. It was treated like a crossing. Everyone in the room understood that a woman might come through it holding a living child, and everyone also understood, even if they did not say it too loudly, that she might not come through it at all. Before we step fully into that room, I want to ask you something simple. Where are you listening from tonight? Are you in bed already with the lights low? Are you in your kitchen, maybe half paying attention while you make something to eat? Are you somewhere far from the kind of cold, smoky little room we're about to enter? And what time is it where you are, I ask, because time matters in tonight's story. Not clock time exactly, because most ordinary people in 1690 were not living by clocks the way we do. They lived by light, by weather, by the sound of animals outside, by the condition of the fire, by the distance between one pain and the next. A woman in labour did not watch minutes pass on a screen. She listened to her own breathing. She watched faces. She heard someone move wood in the hearth. She heard a door open and close as a neighbour woman arrived. She felt the next contraction beginning before anyone else knew it was coming. So wherever you are tonight, notice for just a second how safe your room probably is. Notice the light switch. Notice the clean water. Notice the medicine cabinet, even if there is nothing impressive in it. Notice the phone near your hand, and the fact that if something went badly wrong, help could be called in seconds. In 1690, none of that existed. The distance between fear and help could be 5 miles of dark woods, a frozen path, a swollen creek, or simply the fact that the nearest person with any experience was already attending another woman in another house. If this kind of storytelling speaks to you, if you find yourself settling in and feeling that quiet pull of ordinary history, it would mean the world to me if you hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. You do not have to do it right now. Do it when you feel it. When something in this story makes you pause, or look around your own room differently, or think about someone whose name was never recorded but whose life mattered completely to the people around her, and if you want to share where you are watching from tonight, leave it in the comments. I genuinely love reading those. There is something fitting about people from different places gathering around a story like this, because childbirth in colonial America was never meant to be faced alone. It pulled women together. It brought neighbours through the dark. It turned a house into a place of waiting, watching, praying and work. Now, let us go back. The year is 1690. We are somewhere in English colonial America, perhaps in Massachusetts, perhaps in Connecticut, perhaps in a small settlement in Virginia or Maryland, though the details shift depending on region, religion, season, and wealth. The home we are entering is not a mansion, and not a plantation house with polished rooms and imported furniture. It is an ordinary dwelling, the kind most people lived in. 1 or 2 rooms, a hearth at the centre of daily life, a bed in the main room or behind a rough partition, maybe a loft above where children sleep. The walls are not sealed tightly. Wind finds its way through. Smoke does not always rise cleanly up the chimney. The floor may be wooden if the family is doing reasonably well, or packed earth if they are not. The household has animals nearby, tools near the door, stored food wherever it can be kept safe from damp and mice, and a constant awareness that winter, sickness, hunger, and accident are never very far away. In that house, birth is both common and frightening. A married woman might expect to give birth many times across her adult life. Some women bore 8, 10, 12 children, not because life was abundant and easy, but because infant and child mortality were high, because children were labour, because marriage usually meant pregnancy, and because there was no reliable way for most couples to control when pregnancy came. But the fact that birth was common did not make it safe. If anything, its familiarity made the danger more intimate. Everyone had seen it before. Everyone knew a woman who had laboured for 2 days and died. Everyone knew a baby who had taken 1 breath and no more. Everyone knew a mother who survived the birth but developed fever afterward and was buried before the week was out. This is one of the first things modern people struggle to hold in their minds. We often imagine danger as something rare and dramatic. A crisis interrupts normal life. Something goes wrong and everyone reacts. But for women in the 1600s and 1700s, childbirth was danger woven into normal life itself. It was expected, prepared for, prayed over, and feared all at once. A woman might sew baby clothes while knowing the child might never wear them. She might prepare linen for the birth, while knowing that linen might be used to wrap her body. She might joke with neighbour women in the afternoon and cry out for God's mercy before midnight. None of these things contradicted each other. They belonged to the same world. People did not need to be told that life was fragile. They buried proof of it in churchyards every year. Inside this world, there was no doctor standing by in the way we picture one. In many births, there was no male physician present at all. Childbirth was considered women's work, and the person most likely to attend the labour was a midwife, usually an older woman with experience, reputation and practical knowledge built over many years. She had learned by watching, by doing, by remembering which women survived and which remedies seemed to help, by feeling the position of a child through the mother's body, by knowing when labour was moving and when it had stalled into something dangerous. She was not ignorant. That is an easy modern mistake to make. The colonial midwife often possessed a deep, hard-earned knowledge of birth as it actually happened in real rooms to real women. She knew how to encourage a labouring woman, how to keep order among anxious relatives, how to cut the cord, how to deliver the afterbirth, how to recognise some forms of trouble. But she did not have what danger often required. She did not have forceps in most ordinary cases, especially early in the period, and even when such instruments existed, they were guarded by male practitioners and not widely available. She did not have sterile instruments. She did not have anesthesia. She did not have a way to stop severe internal bleeding once it began. She did not have a way to turn every badly positioned baby. She did not have a way to see inside the body. She had hands, experience, herbs, cloth, heat, prayer, and whatever strength remained in the woman giving birth. There is a hard truth sitting at the centre of tonight's story, and we should not rush past it. The pain of childbirth in 1690 was not only endured because people were tougher then. That is a phrase modern people use too easily, and it does not really explain anything. They were not made of different material. Their nerves worked like ours. Their fear worked like ours. A contraction that grips the whole. Body does not become gentle because the year is 1690. A long obstructed labour does not become bearable because a woman has spent her life carrying water and chopping kindling and kneading bread. These women felt pain. They screamed. They prayed. They cursed sometimes, even if no one later admitted it. They begged. They exhausted themselves. They lost consciousness. They came back to pain again. What was different was not the body's ability to suffer. What was different was the number of options available when suffering began. A woman today may still face pain and danger in childbirth, and we should not pretend modern birth is simple or risk-free. But in 1690, pain was not managed so much as witnessed. The women around the bed could rub the labouring mother's back, help her change position, give her warm drinks, speak comfort, recite scripture, wipe sweat from her face, hold her hands and urge her to keep going. They could not make the pain stop, and the safety problem went far beyond pain. If a labour went on too long, the mother weakened. If the baby was positioned badly, everyone waited with growing fear. If the mother began bleeding heavily, there were no blood banks, no operating room, no modern surgical response. If infection entered during or after the birth, no one understood bacteria. They understood foul smells, corruption, bad air, imbalance, divine judgment, weakness, and fever. But they did not understand that invisible organisms on hands, cloth, tools, or bedding could move from one body to another and kill a woman who had survived the labour itself. A midwife might wash her hands because cleanliness mattered in a household sense, but germ theory was still far in the future. Clean did not mean sterile. A cloth could look clean and still carry danger. A hand could look clean and still carry death. That is one of the most frightening facts in this entire story, because it means a birth could seem successful at first. The child could cry, the mother could smile weakly, the women could thank God, the house could breathe again, and then, 2 days later, the fever could begin. Picture the room now, not as a painting, not as a dramatic scene arranged for us, but as a working space. Someone has been sent for the midwife. If it is night, that errand matters. A child or husband or neighbour boy may have to cross dark ground with a lantern, hoping the flame holds. If the weather is bad, the delay grows. If snow is falling, if rain has turned the path to mud, if the nearest midwife lives miles away, then labour begins without her. Inside the house, the women prepare what they can. Water is heated, not because anyone understands sterilisation, but because warm water is useful, comforting, and part of the household practice. Linen is gathered. The bed is prepared with old cloths, because birth is messy, and good bedding is valuable. The fire is built up. The room must be warm, especially if the baby comes in winter. A newborn entering a cold room in 1690 has no incubator, no heated hospital bassinet, no trained neonatal team. Warmth is the hearth. Warmth is a blanket. Warmth is a woman's body. Warmth is someone making sure the fire does not fall too low while everyone else is watching the bed. The men in many ordinary births are not the centre of the room. This is important. The father may be nearby, waiting, pacing, praying, pretending to have work to do, or being sent on errands because anxious men are more useful when moving. In many communities, the birthing room belongs to women. Female relatives, neighbours, and the midwife form the circle around the mother. They bring knowledge, memory, and the authority of experience. A young woman giving birth for the first time is not simply a patient. She's being brought into a frightening inheritance shared by the women around her. They know what she's feeling because many of them have felt it. They know what she fears because they feared it too. There may be tenderness in that room, real tenderness. A hand under her shoulders, a cup held to her lips, someone telling her she's doing well, even if the room has begun to worry. There may also be discipline. Do not waste your strength. Breathe. Pray. Bear down. Hold still. Get up. Walk. Kneel. Try again. Colonial women were not sentimental about birth in the way we sometimes are. They could be loving and practical at the same time because the situation required both. Religion sits in the room too, whether spoken, allowed or not. In Puritan New England especially, childbirth carried heavy spiritual meaning. Pain in childbirth was often understood through the story of Eve, through the idea that women bore pain as part of the fallen condition of humanity. That belief could be harsh, but it also gave suffering a place inside a larger explanation. Prayers were not decoration. They were part of the work. A woman in labour might call out to God not in a polite way, but because she believed her life and the life of her child were truly in God's hands. The people around her believed that too. They might pray for safe delivery, for strength, for mercy, for the child's soul if the baby seemed weak, for the mother's soul if her strength began to fail. This is not a small detail. In a world with so few medical tools, prayer was not what people did after practical options were exhausted. It was present from the beginning. It gave language to fear when fear had nowhere else to go. And yet, for all the fear, birth was also ordinary. That is the part that makes this history so difficult and so human. A woman could go into labour in a house where bread still needed to be baked, animals still needed to be fed, older children still needed watching, and the fire still needed tending. The household did not stop being a household because a baby was coming. Someone had to keep the ordinary world running while the extraordinary thing happened in the corner. Children might be sent away, or they might hear more than anyone intended. A little girl lying in the loft could listen to her mother's cries and understand, perhaps for the first time, what waited for women. A boy could see neighbour women entering the house with serious faces and understand that his mother was in danger without anyone explaining it. Birth was private, but in a small house privacy had limits. Walls were thin. Rooms were shared. Fear moved through the whole dwelling. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because it changes the way we understand family life in colonial America. Every person in that house had likely been shaped by birth and death at close range. A father waiting near the hearth may have already buried one wife or one child. A midwife arriving with her bundle may have delivered healthy babies in that same family and also watched one die. The labouring woman herself may have already lost infants. She may be thinking of them now, though no one asks. She may be thinking of the tiny clothes stored away, of the grave near the meeting house, of the last birth and how long it took, of whether this one feels the same or different. She may be young, perhaps very young by modern standards, married in her teens or early 20s, or she may be worn by repeated pregnancies, her body asked again and again to do something dangerous because the survival of households and settlements depended on women continuing to bear children. This is where the title of tonight's story begins to show its full meaning. No pain relief, no safety, not because nobody cared, not because women were ignored completely, not because every room was cruel. Many women were cared for with great seriousness by other women who knew exactly how much was at stake. But care is not the same as control. Love is not the same as safety. A husband could love his wife and still be helpless if she hemorrhaged. A midwife could be skilled and still lose a mother to infection. Neighbour women could pray until their voices broke and still watch a newborn fail to breathe. The horror of childbirth in 1690 was not constant screaming or dramatic disaster every time. It was the uncertainty. It was the knowledge that a normal labour could become fatal without warning. It was the fact that no one in the room could promise the mother she would be alive tomorrow, and know that promise was true. Modern birth has its own fears, and anyone who has been near it knows that even now, with all our machines and medicines, childbirth can still humble a room. But the difference is that today danger usually triggers systems. Alarms, teams, protocols, medications, surgery, blood, oxygen, transport. In 1690, danger triggered people. A midwife leaned closer, a neighbour ran for help, someone heated more water, someone prayed harder, someone opened the door and looked into the dark, hoping to see another woman arriving with experience enough to change the outcome. The system was human, local, improvised, and limited by distance, weather, class, race. law, and luck. Enslaved women in the colonies faced additional dangers and cruelties that cannot be folded neatly into the experience of free white households. Indigenous women had their own birth traditions, knowledge systems, and community practices, many of which European observers misunderstood or dismissed. Wealthier colonial women might eventually have access to male physicians or imported medical ideas, but that did not guarantee safety, and sometimes introduced new risks. There was no single colonial birth experience, but across these differences the basic truth remains. Giving birth in 1690 meant entering a physical ordeal with very few reliable protections. So tonight, we're going to slow down and look closely, not to sensationalize these women's suffering, and not to turn the past into a horror story for its own sake. The reality is already serious enough. We're going to look at the midwife walking through darkness with her hands full of everything she knows. We're going to look at the birthing room itself, the heat, the smells, the women gathered around the bed, the way fear was managed in a space without modern medicine. We're going to look honestly at pain, not as a vague idea, but as something endured minute after minute with no epidural waiting at the edge of it. We're going to talk about blood, fever, obstructed labour, torn bodies, and the dangers no one could see because the science that would explain them had not yet arrived. We're going to talk about the newborn's first hour, that fragile stretch of time when a child had to breathe, cry, warm, feed, and prove to everyone in the room that it intended to stay. And we are going to stay with the mother after the birth, because survival did not end when the baby was born. Recovery in a colonial home was its own uncertain passage, full of weakness, bleeding, infection risk, household demands, and a silence that history placed over women's pain because it was considered too ordinary to record. The fire is higher now. Someone has added wood because the room must stay warm. Outside, the settlement is dark. There may be frost on the ground. There may be rain tapping against the shutters. The woman in labour has stopped trying to pretend that the pains are small. They're coming closer now. The first quiet messages have moved through the household. A neighbour has been called. The midwife, if she can be reached, is wrapping herself against the weather. She knows this path. She has walked it before for other women, in other seasons, for births that ended with laughter, and births that ended with a house gone silent. She carries no miracle with her, no instrument that can make this safe, no medicine that can take the pain away. What she carries is memory, judgment, courage, and the calm authority of someone who has seen enough to understand that panic wastes time. Inside the house, the labouring woman grips the edge of the bed or the hand of another woman and waits for the next pain to rise. Everyone else waits with her, listening, counting in their heads, watching the door, watching the fire, watching her face. Because in 1690 this is where birth begins, not under bright lights, not inside a hospital, but in a crowded room at the edge of darkness, with women gathering one by one around the bed. The woman sent to fetch the midwife does not run in the way we picture running. She cannot. Not if it is winter. Not if the path is frozen in ridges where cartwheels hardened the mud days earlier. Not if there are roots under the thin crust of snow, or stones she knows by memory, but cannot see clearly, with only a small lantern held low against the wind. She moves quickly, but carefully, with the kind of speed that belongs to people who understand that falling down in the dark only makes everything worse. The house she is leaving behind has already changed. A few hours earlier it was an ordinary home at night, with the fire covered, the children asleep or pretending to be, the animals quiet outside, and the mother resting heavily in the strange, uncomfortable way a woman rests at the end of pregnancy. Now it has become a waiting room without walls, a place where every sound matters. A breath held too long, a board creaking. A pot shifted near the hearth. The low voice of one woman telling another to bring more water, and beneath all of it, returning again and again, the sound that has made this errand necessary. The labouring woman, no longer able to hide the pains from the household, no longer able to say it may pass by morning. The person walking through the dark may be the husband. In some households it would be. He may throw on his coat, take the lantern and go himself because the distance is too far to send a child and the need is too serious to leave to anyone slower. But often, if another woman is already present, she may be the one to go because she knows exactly what words to say at the midwife's door. A man can say, "My wife is in labour." A woman can say more with fewer words. She can describe the spacing of the pains, whether the waters have broken, whether there has been bleeding, whether this is a first birth or a fifth, whether the mother still speaks between the pains or has gone quiet in the way that makes experienced women look at one another without saying what they fear. In 1690, information travels by feet, by breath, by memory. There is no message sent ahead, no bell to ring at a central place, no doctor's office, no guarantee that the person you need is at home. The midwife may be asleep. She may be ill herself. She may already be at another birth. She may be miles away with a woman whose labour has gone on since yesterday. And then the house, waiting in the dark, must make do with whoever can come. Think about that for a moment. Today, we tend to imagine help as a fixed thing. It exists somewhere, and the problem is reaching it quickly enough. An ambulance is somewhere. A hospital is somewhere. A trained team is somewhere. Even if the system is imperfect, even if modern birth can still become frightening, the idea of help is built into the world around us. In 1690, help was a person. One person, usually. A woman with hands that had delivered babies before. A woman whose knowledge lived inside her body because she had acquired it by watching other bodies struggle. If she was absent, there was no equivalent replacement waiting in a clean room with instruments prepared. There might be another woman in the village who had attended births. There might be a mother, an aunt, a neighbour who had delivered 6 children of her own and knew enough to be useful. But the midwife, the true midwife, the one people sent for first, carried a kind of authority that was not written on paper and did not come from a university. It came from the fact that, when the room filled with fear, she had been there before. Her house is quiet when the knocking comes. Not a polite knock. Not the kind of knock used for a social call or business. It is urgent, but still shaped by the manners of a world where people rarely burst through doors unless the house is burning. The midwife wakes quickly, because women who do this work learn to sleep near the surface. Her own fire may be low. Her own body may ache. She may be older than the labouring woman by 20 or 30 years, though not always. She may have children of her own asleep in the house. She may be a widow or a wife, or a woman whose household has long since accepted that she will be called away at all hours because babies do not respect darkness, weather, harvest, Sabbath, or exhaustion. Someone speaks through the doorway, and she understands before the sentence is finished. There is no need for drama. This is the work. She dresses in practical layers, covers her hair, gathers what she uses, and steps out into the same dark that frightened the messenger. What did she carry? This is where modern imagination often does too much. We want a bag, because doctors carry bags in our minds, and because a bag suggests tools, and tools suggest control. Some midwives did carry bundles or baskets, and what they brought depended on place, wealth, habit, and the traditions of the community. She might bring clean linen if she had it, though clean in this world did not mean sterile. She might bring thread or tape for tying the cord, a small knife or scissors for cutting it, herbs she trusted, perhaps something to encourage labour or calm the stomach, perhaps a salve or oil, perhaps a little soap if available, perhaps pins, cloths, and other small household objects that became important at birth. She might carry nothing more impressive than experience and a few things tucked into her apron or wrapped in cloth. There was no shining kit of modern equipment, no stethoscope for the baby's heart, no blood pressure cuff, no antiseptic solution, no syringe of medicine to stop hemorrhage, no forceps in most ordinary hands at this date, and no safe surgical option if a child could not pass. A midwife arriving before dawn in 1690 brought presents. She brought judgment. She brought memory. Those were not small things, but they were not enough to make birth safe. The road back to the labouring house is not empty in the way modern roads can be empty. It is alive with small sounds, trees moving, ice cracking underfoot, an animal shifting in a barn somewhere beyond the lantern light. The messenger may walk beside her, speaking in low bursts, giving the details again because saying them makes the errand feel less helpless. The midwife asks questions. How long has she been pained? Is this her first? Has she bled? Has the child moved today? Does she feel pressure? Has she vomited? Can she stand? Can she speak? The answers matter, but none of them give certainty. Birth in this world is a situation read through signs. The midwife cannot measure dilation in the standardized language of centimeters. She does not record contractions on a strip of paper. She observes the mother's face, posture, voice, sweat, strength, fear, and the rhythm of the pains. She listens to what the women in the house have noticed. She places what she hears beside every birth she's attended before, and from that comparison she begins to understand whether this is likely to be a long ordinary labour or something already bending toward danger. By the time she reaches the house, the sky may only just be beginning to pale, or it may still be completely black. Dawn in a colonial settlement does not arrive all at once. It comes slowly, showing first as a slight thinning of the darkness around the edges of the world. Inside, the room is brighter than the road because the fire has been stirred up and fed. The smell meets her before the faces do. Smoke, damp wool, hot water, sweat, old bedding, fear. Fear has no smell by itself, perhaps, but rooms where people are afraid always seem to have one. The air is too warm near the hearth and too cold near the walls. Someone has pushed furniture aside, someone has laid old cloths over the bed or pallet. Someone has found the best linen they are willing to risk, because even in crisis a household calculates. Good sheets are not used lightly. Cloth is labour, cloth is money, cloth is winter clothing, baby wrappings, bandages, burial, and proof that women have worked with their hands for months before this night ever began. The midwife does not enter as a guest. She enters as someone who belongs to the emergency. The household rearranges around her. If the husband is in the room, he may step back, or he may be sent to bring more wood, more water, another neighbour, a stool, a rope, whatever she thinks might be needed. This is not necessarily because he is useless or unwanted, though some probably were both. It is because the authority of the birthing room is female. The midwife has jurisdiction here in a way few colonial women had jurisdiction anywhere else. In a society where law and church placed men at the head of households, birth created one of the rare spaces where women commanded the room through necessity. A midwife could instruct a husband. She could order neighbours into motion. She could tell the mother when to move, when to rest, when to push, when to stop wasting strength. People listened because they understood that this was her work and because the stakes were too high for pride. She goes first to the labouring woman, not to the fire, not to the husband, not to the bundle of cloth laid out near the bed, to the woman. She looks at her face. This tells her more than words at first. Is the mother frightened but alert? Is she exhausted already? Are the pains taking her fully? Or is she still in that early stage where she can speak and apologise and try to behave? Women in labour often apologise, even now. They apologise for noise, for mess, for fear, for needing things. In 1690, a woman may feel an even stronger pressure to endure well, to be brave, to submit to God's will, to show the women around her that she is not weak. The midwife has seen this too. She may speak gently or sharply, depending on what she believes will help. Not because she lacks compassion, but because birth leaves little room for false comfort. She may tell the woman the pains are doing their work. She may tell her not to cry out too soon because she will need her breath later. She may tell her to grip the bedpost, to kneel, to sit on the birthing stool if one is used. to walk a little if labour has slowed, to lie back if she needs examining, to drink. She may put a hand on the mother's belly and wait through a contraction, feeling what she can through layers of skin, muscle, tension, and fear. A birthing stool may be in the room, though not every birth used one. Some colonial women delivered in bed, some kneeling, some squatting, some supported by other women, some on stools with shaped seats meant to let gravity help the child descend. The exact practice varied. What did not vary was the physicality of it. Birth was not managed from a distance. It was hands-on. Women lifted, held, braced, wiped, turned, and supported one another. If the mother grew faint, someone held her up. If she needed to change position, 2 women might move her. If she vomited, someone cleaned it. If her legs trembled, someone steadied them. If she cried out for her own mother, whether living or dead, someone heard it and remembered their own birth pains. There is nothing delicate about this kind of care. It is intimate in the old sense of the word, meaning close enough to be unavoidable. The midwife's reputation matters greatly. In many communities, she is not merely a helper, but a public figure, though not always officially recognised in the way men were. She may be called to testify in cases involving pregnancy, legitimacy, assault, or disputed parentage. She may be asked to question an unmarried woman in labour about the father of the child, because the pain and danger of birth were sometimes treated as a moment when truth would come out. That is one of the harsher realities of the period. The birthing room could be supportive, but it could also become a place of pressure. For a married woman whose pregnancy fits neatly inside household expectations, the gathered women may form a circle of care. For an unmarried servant girl, a poor woman, an enslaved woman, or anyone whose pregnancy threatened the social order, birth could include scrutiny, shame, and legal danger alongside physical danger. The midwife stood at the crossing point between women's knowledge and community authority. She could comfort, she could witness, she could report. Her hands helped bring life into the world, but her words afterward could shape reputations, court cases, and futures. In the ordinary family we're imagining tonight, the labouring woman is married, and the house has been preparing for this child in practical ways for weeks. Small garments may have been made or borrowed. Cloths have been set aside. A cradle may be ready if the family owns one. But readiness is never confidence. The midwife knows that a mother who looks strong at dawn can be near death by noon. She knows that a first birth can stretch across a day and a night until the woman is so tired she cannot push effectively. She knows that a baby can be too large, turned badly, or caught in a way no amount of urging can fix. She knows that after the child comes, the afterbirth must follow, and if it does not, danger remains. She knows the bleeding must be watched. This is one of her most important tasks. Blood is expected at birth, but too much blood changes the room instantly. Women who had seen enough births knew the difference between mess and crisis. They may not have measured it in millilitres, but they knew when a woman's colour changed, when her voice weakened, when the cloths filled too fast, when the bed became a place everyone looked at and then looked away from. For now, perhaps, the signs are not yet terrible. The labour is real, but moving. The midwife warms her hands near the fire. She may ask for more water to be heated, more cloths to be placed nearby, the room to be kept clear of children unless an older girl is needed to help. Girls learned by watching, sometimes earlier than we would expect. A daughter old enough to carry water or hold a candle might be old enough to understand that women's work included blood and terror. No one has to explain this to her as education. She is simply there, and by being there she begins to inherit knowledge. She sees who speaks calmly, she sees who panics, she sees the midwife examine the mother and say nothing for a moment, which may frighten her more than any scream. She sees the labouring woman transformed from mother into body and soul at once, suffering and working, helpless and powerful, dependent and central to the whole house. The Midwife may use remedies that seem strange to us now. Warm drinks, herbal preparations, oils, poultices, certain scents, certain foods, perhaps alcohol in some circumstances, perhaps things meant to strengthen the mother or bring on labour. Some remedies may have offered comfort, some may have done little, some may have caused harm. The line between medicine, household wisdom and inherited belief was not clean. A woman might be given a preparation because it had helped someone once, or because an older midwife recommended it, or because a printed receipt book included something like it, or because no one could bear doing nothing. That last reason matters. Human beings rarely endure helplessness quietly. When a labour goes badly, people reach for action. Heat more water, change her position, give her this, take that away, send for someone else, pray again. Action gives fear a task, but it would be unfair to describe the midwife's knowledge as mere superstition. Much of what she did came from observation. She knew that warmth mattered. She knew that a mother needed fluids if she could keep them down. She knew that exhaustion could stall the body. She knew that calm voices helped more than chaos. She knew that the baby must be kept warm. She knew that the cord should be tied. She knew that the afterbirth had to be accounted for. She knew that a foul smell after birth was a terrible sign, even if she did not know why. She knew that fever in the days after delivery could carry a woman away. She knew which women in the community had narrow hips, which had hard labours before, which had lost babies, which had bled badly, which were young and frightened, which were older and worn down by too many pregnancies. In a small settlement, the midwife's knowledge was personal. She was not treating a category called patient. She was attending Mary or Elizabeth or Sarah, a woman whose mother she may have known, whose last baby she may have caught, whose kitchen she may have sat in during better hours. This personal knowledge could be reassuring, and it could also be heavy. Imagine carrying in your memory the births of an entire community, the first cries, the stillness, the mothers who survived and the ones who did not, the names of babies baptized quickly because no one believed they would last the hour, the faces of husbands at the door, the older children waiting in the yard, the beds you returned to for a second birth, a third, a fourth, each time remembering what happened before and hoping not to see it again. A midwife did not leave her work at the workplace, because the workplace was every house around her. She might pass a child in the meeting house and remember his first breath. She might pass a grave and remember the night she could not stop the bleeding. She might hear laughter from a family table and know that one place is empty, because birth took the mother who used to sit there. This is the kind of history that rarely announces itself. A midwife's work often left only thin traces in records, if it left any at all. Men wrote laws, sermons, property deeds, military reports, shipping accounts. Women delivered the population those records later counted. Their work was everywhere and barely visible. In some towns, midwives were paid in goods, small sums, services, or community respect. In other places, the work blurred into neighbourly obligation. A woman came because she was needed. Payment might be irregular, modest, or unrecorded. Yet the settlement depended on her. Without midwives, childbirth became even more dangerous. Without women willing to attend other women, every labouring mother would face the ordeal more alone. As dawn approaches, the house begins to show itself in grey detail. The shapes that were only shadows become benches, buckets, hanging herbs, a stool, a cradle, a child's shoe near the hearth. Outside, a rooster may start too early, as roosters often do, indifferent to human suffering. The ordinary day is beginning whether the birth is ready or not. This is one of the hardest things about labour in a pre-modern household. The world does not pause. The cow still needs milking. The fire still needs tending. Bread still needs watching. If the family has small children, they will wake hungry and confused. Someone must manage them. Perhaps sending them to a neighbour, perhaps keeping them near the loft, perhaps telling them in a low voice to be quiet because their mother is working. That phrase would not have sounded metaphorical. Labour was work, hard work. The word itself tells the truth. The midwife may ask for the mother to be moved as the pains grow stronger. If the woman is in early labour, she may be encouraged to walk, to let gravity do what it can, to keep from stiffening in fear. If the birth is nearer, she may be settled, where the midwife can best help her. The women around her adjust their roles almost without speaking. One tends the fire, one manages water, one supports the mother's back, one wipes her face, one prepares cloth for the child, one watches the midwife watching everything. There is a rhythm to the room now. During a pain, voices become firm. Between pains they lower. The mother may sleep for seconds at a time, dropping into exhaustion so quickly it looks like fainting, then waking as the next contraction rises. Her hair is damp. Her shift clings to her. Modesty, so carefully guarded in daily life, has become secondary to survival. Though women still try to preserve what dignity they can, the midwife understands this too. She has seen bodies exposed in crisis, and part of her work is to make that exposure feel held rather than abandoned. No one in the room can know the time with precision unless the household owns a clock, and many do not. They know that the dark is thinning. They know how many times the fire has been fed. They know how often the pains come. They know how long the midwife has been there by the ache in their knees and backs. The labouring woman knows time differently. She knows it by waves. The space before the next pain shortens until there is almost no rest inside it. If she has given birth before, she may recognise the change and fear it anyway. If this is her first birth, she may believe each new intensity must be the worst possible, only to discover that the body has further to go. The midwife, watching her, begins to prepare the room for delivery. There is a point in many births when conversation changes. Earlier, women may speak of practical things: cloth, water, wood, whether the midwife has eaten, whether the children are awake, whether someone should fetch another neighbour. But as the birth nears, talk narrows. The mother's body has become the centre of every mind in the room. The midwife may position herself, sleeves rolled, hands ready. The woman supporting the mother braces herself. Someone brings the cloths closer. Someone checks the fire. If prayer is spoken now, it may be brief and direct. Lord, help her. Lord, spare them. Lord, have mercy. Not elaborate theology, not sermon language, the kind of prayer people say when the danger is near enough to touch. And still, even here, the midwife cannot promise. That is what I want us to keep remembering. Her arrival changes the room, but it does not remove the risk. It gives the mother a better chance, perhaps, and it gives everyone else a leader, a structure, a pair of hands trained by long practice. But she's not a wall between life and death. She's a woman standing near that doorway with the labouring mother, trying to guide her through. If the child comes well, if the bleeding is manageable, if the mother has strength, if the newborn cries, then by daylight the house may fill with the stunned relief that follows danger. Someone may laugh too loudly. Someone may cry quietly while folding ruined cloth. The father may be called in. The baby may be shown to him, red, wet, furious, alive. The midwife may tie the cord, deliver the afterbirth, inspect what must be inspected, clean what can be cleaned, and tell the mother to rest as if rest were something a woman in that house could simply claim. If things do not go well, the same dawn looks different. The same grey light falls across the same floor, but every object in the room seems sharper. The bucket, the bedpost, the cloths, the midwife's face. A labour that stalls before dawn can become the beginning of a long day no one knows how to end. The mother's strength can drain hour by hour. A baby can remain beyond reach. Bleeding can start too soon or too heavily. The midwife may send for a male practitioner if one is available, but that availability depends on region, class, distance, and time. Even if he comes, his tools may be limited, his knowledge uneven, his arrival too late. In some cases, the presence of a man with instruments did not mean safety. It meant desperation had reached a point where the women's room opened to the wider world of formal medicine, and formal medicine in 1690 was often confident far beyond what it could actually do. The midwife knows this. She has lived long enough inside birth to distrust easy optimism, yet she also knows that fear cannot be allowed to rule the room, so she keeps her voice steady. She tells the mother what to do next. She tells the women where to stand. She makes decisions with incomplete knowledge, because no one has complete knowledge. That may be the most accurate description of her work. Decision after decision, made in heat, darkness, pain, and uncertainty, with two lives depending on the outcome, and no one able to step outside the moment and consult a safer world. By the time the first true light reaches the window, the midwife has become part of the house's breathing. She has crossed from outside help into the centre of the family's most dangerous hour. Her cloak may be hanging near the door. Her hands may be stained. Her face may be calm in a way that costs her something. The labouring woman may hate her voice and depend on it completely. The other women may watch her for signs, because everyone reads the midwife. If she looks unworried, the room steadies. If she grows quiet, the room feels it. If she asks for something quickly, people move. Authority in this room does not need to announce itself. It is proven by usefulness. Outside, the settlement begins its day. Smoke rises from other chimneys. Men step into yards. Animals stir. Somewhere someone breaks ice on a water bucket. Somewhere else, a child complains about cold feet. Ordinary life resumes around the house where birth is underway, and that contrast is almost unbearable if you think about it too long. For the wider world, dawn is routine. For the woman inside, dawn may be the hour she becomes a mother, or the hour her danger deepens. The midwife stands beside her, not as a miracle worker, not as a figure from a charming old village scene, but as one of the most necessary people in colonial life. She carries the community's memory of birth in her hands, and as the room grows warmer and brighter, the work moves from waiting into the harder stage, the stage where comfort thins, pain takes over the whole body, and everyone present must face the truth that in 1690 there is no way around the suffering, only through it. The birthing room in 1690 was not a special room at all, and that is one of the first things worth understanding. It was usually the same room where the family cooked, slept, prayed, stored tools, mended clothes, fed children, and survived winter. We tend to imagine important events having their own spaces: a courtroom for judgment, a church for worship, a hospital room for birth. But in an ordinary colonial home, the most dangerous and intimate event in a woman's life unfolded in the middle of the household, beside the same hearth where porridge had been stirred that morning and stockings had been dried the night before. The room did not become safe because birth was happening there. It became crowded, hot, tense, and necessary. Furniture was pushed aside. Children were moved if there was anywhere to move them. Bedding was rearranged. Old cloths were brought out, the ones too worn for good use but too valuable to throw away. A pot was placed near the fire. Water was heated. The air thickened with smoke and steam and human breath. The room became a working place, and every woman inside it understood, without needing to say so, that the work could end in life, death, or both before the day was over. By the time the midwife had settled into her role, the household had already begun to obey a different order. The ordinary authority of the home had shifted. The father might own the house in the eyes of law. He might lead family prayers. He might decide when fields were planted, what debts were paid, and which child was old enough to work beside him. But here, in this heated room where a woman's body had become the centre of the whole household, authority moved into the hands of women. This did not mean the world outside had changed. It did not mean colonial society suddenly forgot its rules about husbands and wives. It meant necessity had created a smaller world inside the larger one, and in that smaller world the midwife spoke with a kind of command that came from being useful, when usefulness mattered more than rank. If she told someone to bring more water, water was brought. If she said the room was too cold, the fire was built up. If she wanted the husband out, or closer, or running for another woman, he went. A birth room was one of the few places in colonial America where female knowledge could openly direct an entire household, and no sermon about women's obedience could make that knowledge unnecessary. The heat came first. It had to. A woman in labour could sweat until her hair and shift were soaked, but the room still needed warmth, because the baby, if it came alive, would enter the world wet, small, and unable to keep itself warm. There was no nursery, no warmed hospital blanket, no nurse ready to carry the child to a heated bassinet. Warmth was produced by wood, and wood meant labour done months earlier by someone's hands. So the fire was fed even if the mother complained of heat. The hearth was stirred, embers brightened, logs shifted with iron tongs, and the room grew close. In winter, this created a strange division of air. Near the fire, the heat could feel almost punishing. Near the walls, cold still pressed through cracks and seams. A woman might be burning with effort and still have cold air touching her feet. A newborn might be wrapped quickly and held near the hearth, but not too close because sparks snapped and smoke rolled and everything useful in that room carried its own danger. The same fire that kept the child alive could scorch cloth, ignite straw, fill lungs with smoke and exhaust the women working around it. Nothing was simple. Even warmth had to be managed. The bed itself was often not the clean white bed our minds invent when we hear the word birth. Beds in ordinary homes were valuable pieces of household property, built from wood, ropes, straw, feathers if the family was fortunate, wool blankets, linen sheets that represented months of labour or serious expense. A woman might labour on the main bed, especially if it was the only practical place, but no one forgot that birth could ruin bedding. Blood, fluid, sweat, afterbirth, and the mess of delivery were not symbolic. They were material problems in a world where washing required water carried by hand, soap was precious or homemade, and fabric did not appear cheaply from a shop. Old sheets, worn shifts, rags and scraps were layered beneath her. If the family was poor, there might never be enough. If the birth was difficult, the supply of cloth could disappear quickly. Someone would be told to fetch more. Someone would open a chest and make a decision. This rag, this old shirt, this piece saved for the baby? Every object in the room had a history of labour behind it, and birth consumed those objects without apology. The mother did not lie still like a patient in a modern bed, unless she had no strength left to do otherwise. She might stand, kneel, lean over a chest, sit on a birthing stool, squat supported under the arms by two women, or clutch a rope or cloth tied somewhere sturdy so she could pull against it when the pain came. The birthing stool, where it was used, was not a piece of quaint antique furniture. It was a practical object designed around the old knowledge that gravity could help. Some had a horseshoe-shaped seat, low enough for the woman's feet to brace against the floor, with the midwife positioned in front and women behind or beside to hold her. Sitting that way exposed the woman completely, and modesty did not vanish just because it was inconvenient. Colonial women lived in a world of strict bodily expectations. They were taught to be covered, controlled, guarded in speech and movement. Then birth arrived and demanded the body without manners. A woman who had spent her whole life being told to lower her eyes, keep her voice moderate, and conduct herself with restraint might find herself half-dressed, sweating, crying out, gripping another woman's arm hard enough to bruise it. The birthing room had to make room for that contradiction. It had to protect her dignity while ignoring the rules that would have made survival harder. The women's hands did much of that protecting. One hand pressed a cloth to her forehead, another held a cup to her mouth, another supported her back, another lifted her shift out of the way, another cleaned blood, another warmed a cloth near the fire, another took the mother's fingers and let them squeeze until the knuckles hurt. There is something important here, and it is easy to miss because records rarely preserve it. The birthing room was not only the midwife's room, it was a room of women's hands. A neighbour woman who had given birth 6 times might know how to hold a labouring body through a contraction. A mother might know when her daughter was frightened before she said a word. A sister might run between the hearth and the bed, carrying water, folding linen, trying not to look scared. An older girl might be given small tasks and learn, without anyone naming it as education, how women survived or failed to survive. Care was not abstract. It was physical. To care meant to lift, wipe, brace, warm, carry, wash, hold, and stay. The women in that room did not offer comfort from a distance. They put their bodies around the woman in labour and became part of the machinery of survival. Fear was present from the beginning, but it was not always loud. In fact, some of the most frightening parts of a birth room were quiet. A midwife pausing too long after examining the mother, 2 older women glancing at one another across the bed, a neighbour going silent after noticing blood where there should not yet be so much blood, a husband outside the door hearing voices lower and knowing that lower voices were sometimes worse than cries. Colonial people were familiar with death in a way modern people often are not, but familiarity did not make it painless. It gave them a language for it. It gave them rituals. It gave them prayers. It did not make a woman's life less valuable to the children waiting in the loft or the husband pacing in the yard. When fear entered a birth room, it entered a house full of people who understood what might happen next because they had seen it happen somewhere else. That is different from ignorance. They were not surprised that childbirth could kill. They were afraid because they knew it could. The prayers in that room may have sounded strange to modern ears, not because they were elaborate, but because they were so direct. These were not gentle decorative words placed over an otherwise controlled situation. Prayer was woven into the practical work because the practical work had limits everyone could feel. A woman might cry out, "Lord, help me," during a contraction, and no one would find it theatrical. A midwife might murmur scripture under her breath while working. Another woman might lead a short prayer if the labour stalled or the mother weakened. In Puritan households, childbirth was understood through a religious world that had very little patience for the modern idea that suffering should always be explainable in medical terms. Pain in childbirth was often connected to Eve, sin, providence, humility, and the dangerous mercy of God. That may sound cold from where we sit now, but inside that room it could also give shape to fear. If a woman believed her life was in God's hands, then prayer was not a last resort. It was a way of speaking to the only power large enough to hold what was happening. Nobody in the room could guarantee a safe delivery. God could be asked for one. There is a line we have to walk carefully here. It would be wrong to make the birthing room sound like a peaceful circle of sisterhood, where women gently supported one another through a natural process untouched by male authority. That version is too soft. It would also be wrong to imagine it only as a brutal chamber of suffering where ignorant people watched helplessly. That version is too flat. The truth is harder and more human. The birthing room could be loving. It could be stern. It could be frightening. It could be skilled. It could be superstitious. It could be efficient. It could be messy, loud, prayerful, practical, and emotionally complicated all at once. A woman might be deeply cared for and still not be safe. A midwife might be very competent and still lack the tools to solve the problem in front of her. Neighbour women might offer real tenderness while also carrying the beliefs of their time, including beliefs about obedience, sin, female endurance, and the expectation that pain must be borne. The room was not modern comfort wearing old clothes. It was its own world, and we should let it remain strange where it was strange. Smell would have filled it completely. This is another thing history often leaves out because written records care more about names and outcomes than air. A birth room in 1690 smelled of wood smoke because almost every room did. It smelled of hot water and damp cloth. It smelled of sweat, and not the light sweat of a short effort, but the deep sour sweat of hours of pain. It smelled of blood once the birth drew near, It smelled of herbs, if any were used. Perhaps pennyroyal, tansy, mugwort, raspberry leaf, or other plants known in women's household medicine, though practices varied widely, and some remedies carried risks of their own. It smelled of old bedding warmed too long by bodies and fire. If the labour was prolonged, the room could become stale and heavy. Opening a door or shutter might bring relief, but it might also bring cold air, and cold air was often feared as dangerous for mother and child. So the women balanced one discomfort against another. Too hot, too cold, too smoky, too exposed, too closed. Every adjustment mattered, and none produced the clean, controlled environment we now associate with medical safety. Light was just as limited. If the birth happened before dawn or after sunset, the room depended on the hearth, and perhaps 1 or 2 candles. A candle near the bed might be necessary for the midwife to see, but candles cost money and labour. Even in crisis, people knew that light was not endless. The flame moved. Shadows moved with it. The mother's face might be clear for one moment and half hidden the next. The midwife's hands might work in a shifting amber light that made everything less precise. Imagine trying to read the colour of blood in firelight. Imagine trying to see whether a newborn's skin was improving or darkening when the room itself was made of shadow. The women in that space relied on touch, sound, and experience as much as sight. They felt warmth or coldness. They heard the quality of a cry. They noticed whether the mother's voice still had force in it. They watched for the slackening of the body that meant exhaustion had gone too far. What modern medicine measures, they interpreted through presence. Sometimes they were right, sometimes the signs came too late. The mother's emotional world is harder to reach, because most ordinary women did not write detailed accounts of what labour felt like. Men sometimes wrote that a wife was delivered of a child, or that both mother and infant were well, or that God had taken one or both. A midwife might record births if she kept a diary, but often in brief practical language. The inner experience, the fear between contractions, the private bargains made with God, the memory of previous births, the dread of leaving children motherless, the anger at pain, the shame of being exposed, the desperate hope to hear a cry, all of that usually went unrecorded. But silence in the record is not silence in the room. The woman felt it. She knew enough to be afraid. If this was her first birth, she may have been frightened by the unknown. If it was not her first, she may have been frightened by what she remembered. A first-time mother can believe for a while that the next pain must surely be the worst. A woman who has delivered before knows the body may ask much more than that. Repeated childbirth did not necessarily make fear smaller. It made it more informed. Around her, the women may have tried to manage that fear by controlling the room. The midwife might send away anyone whose crying made things worse. A neighbour might tell a frightened girl to stop staring. Someone might speak firmly to the mother, not unkindly, but with urgency. Save your strength. Do not fight it. Take breath. Now. These phrases, or versions of them, belong to birth across centuries. There are only so many things to say when a body is doing something enormous and dangerous. Comfort becomes practical. Practicality becomes comfort. A cup of warm drink is comfort. A dry cloth is comfort. A woman who does not leave is comfort. A voice that sounds sure, even when certainty is impossible, is comfort. The mother may ask whether she will die. Perhaps no one answers directly. Perhaps someone says, God willing, no. Perhaps the midwife says, you must work now. That may sound hard, but there are moments in labour when reassurance cannot be allowed to replace instruction. The room needs the mother alive. It needs her breathing, pushing when told, resting when she can, staying inside the work even when the work becomes almost unendurable. The tools nearby are simple enough to look almost useless to modern eyes. Cloth, cord, scissors or knife, a bowl, warm water, perhaps oil, perhaps herbs, perhaps a spoon, perhaps a stool, perhaps a blanket prepared for the child. Yet each object has its place. The cord must be tied, the baby must be received, the mother must be cleaned enough to assess bleeding, the afterbirth must be watched for. If it does not come, the room remains tense. In many births, the moment the child emerged did not end the danger. That is a modern misunderstanding. A woman could deliver a living baby and still die because the placenta was retained, because bleeding would not stop, because fever came later, because internal injury had occurred, because exhaustion had hollowed her out beyond recovery. The women knew birth had stages, even if they did not name them as modern obstetrics does. They knew the child was not the whole story. They watched the mother after the cry. They watched the bed. They watched the blood. In households shaped by English custom, there may also have been social rituals around birth that made the room feel different from ordinary female work. The gathering of women for labour was sometimes called a groaning, a term that sounds blunt because it is. Women came to attend another woman's groaning, and after a safe delivery there might later be a period of lying in, visits, food, and eventual churching or return to public religious life depending on community and denomination. But those later customs belonged to the world after survival. During the labour itself, no one could count on them. The food prepared for a mother after birth meant nothing if she did not live to eat it. The cradle meant nothing if the baby did not breathe. This gave the room an unstable feeling, as if ordinary household objects had been placed under a question. The cradle waits, the swaddling cloth waits, the father waits, the children wait. Everyone waits for the room to declare what kind of day this will be. There may be moments of startling normalcy. That is true in almost every crisis. Someone spills water and curses softly. The fire smokes and a woman has to adjust the damper or shift the wood. A child wakes and has to be hushed. The labouring mother, between pains, may ask whether the bread was taken from the fire, or whether someone has fed the little one, or whether her husband has been told not to stand in the cold. This is not because she fails to grasp the danger. It is because her mind is still a household mind trained by years of responsibility. Women did not stop managing life simply because they were suffering. A mother in labour might still worry about children, food, animals, laundry, reputation, and whether the good blanket was being ruined. That detail moves me more than any dramatic speech could. Even at the edge of one of the most dangerous experiences of her life, part of her may still be trying to keep the house from falling out of order. The women around her may gently take those worries away or ignore them because the birth has become more important than the bread. But the worries themselves are historically honest. Colonial women lived inside obligations so constant that even pain did not fully silence it. The midwife's body also matters in this room. She may have been awake for many hours. She may have walked in bad weather. She may be hungry. Her back may ache from bending. Her hands may be swollen with age or cold. Yet she has to remain attentive. A mistake may not be fixable. If she grows tired, she still watches. If the mother cries out sharply, she listens for whether the cry has changed. If the labour slows, she decides whether to let the mother rest or press her to move. If the baby begins to crown, she must be ready. If the tissue stretches too quickly, there is little she can do compared with modern care, but she may support what she can. If the baby emerges limp, the room turns in an instant toward breath, rubbing, warming, clearing the mouth as best they know, praying, waiting for a sound. The first cry is not sentimental in this room. It is evidence. It tells the women that the child has crossed one threshold. Not all of them, but one. The absence of a cry can make a crowded room feel suddenly enormous. The father's position remains complicated. He may be outside the room, or near the hearth, or in and out with errands. He may be praying in another part of the house. He may be frightened in a way he cannot show, because men in his world are expected to command themselves. He may love his wife deeply, and still be unwelcome at the bed, because the work happening there belongs to women. He may hear his wife's pain and be unable to do anything except obey instructions. That helplessness could be its own torment, but it should not draw our attention away from the woman labouring. History has a habit of turning women's suffering into men's emotional development. In this room, his fear matters, but it is not the centre. The centre is the woman whose body is doing the work, and the women whose hands are trying to help her survive it. If the household is enslaved, the room changes in ways that must be named plainly. Enslaved women in colonial America gave birth under conditions shaped by violence, ownership, forced labour, and the legal theft of their children's freedom. An enslaved mother's pregnancy could be valued by enslavers as an increase in property, a fact so brutal that it resists soft language. Her birth might be attended by other enslaved women with deep knowledge and care, and those women's hands could create a circle of protection within an institution designed to deny protection. But the danger around her was not only medical, it was social, legal and bodily in every sense. She might be expected to return to work quickly. Her child's future was not secure in her arms. The same colonial world that surrounded free women, with patriarchal control, surrounded enslaved women with that and more. Any honest account of birth in 1690 has to leave room for that reality, because the birthing room was never separated from the larger world that built it. For free white women in a small English settlement, the danger was still severe, but the meanings around the child could differ. A healthy baby meant continuation, labour for the future, inheritance, family stability, proof of fertility, perhaps divine favour in the eyes of neighbours. A stillbirth or maternal death could change the household's survival prospects immediately. Who would nurse another infant? Who would cook? Who would manage children? Who would produce cloth, tend the garden, preserve food, help with harvest, maintain the invisible systems that kept the family alive? A mother's death was emotional devastation, but it was also economic disaster. That knowledge sat in the room too, not crudely, not because people were calculating while she cried out, but because everyone understood that households depended on women's labour. Losing her could unmake the family's daily life. The child, if born alive, entered a world that needed the mother almost as urgently as the mother wanted the child. As the pains intensify, the room narrows further. The mother may no longer answer questions. Her body takes over. The midwife watches for the moment when pushing begins in earnest, not as a suggestion but as an unstoppable force. The women supporting her shift their grip. One may brace a foot, another may hold her shoulders. A cloth is placed. The fire pops. Someone whispers a prayer and then stops because the mother needs to hear the midwife. There is no privacy from sound now. The cry that comes from her may frighten the children if they are close enough to hear it. It may frighten the husband. It may even frighten a younger woman in the room who has not yet given birth herself. The older women know the sound. They do not enjoy it, but they know it belongs to the work. The body opens under pressure no person can politely describe while living through it. This is where the phrase "no pain relief" becomes more than a fact. There is no veil drawn over the suffering, no medicine softening its edges, no trained anaesthetist watching a dose, no promise that the next contraction will hurt less. The mother is carried only by her body, the women around her, her faith if it holds, and the hope that pain means progress rather than disaster. That distinction matters. Pain that moves the child downward is terrible but purposeful. Pain that goes on and on without change becomes something else. It becomes a warning. It becomes fear wearing out the room hour by hour. The midwife knows the difference as well as anyone can without modern instruments. She knows when to encourage and when to worry. She may not show all of that worry on her face. A birth room rids faces too carefully for that. If a labour is going well, the room's fear may begin to turn into urgency. The child is near. The mother is exhausted but still inside the work. The midwife speaks more sharply. Now. Again. Hold. Wait. Do not waste it. The women repeat her words, creating a rough chorus around the bed or stool. The mother may feel she cannot do it, and someone will tell her she is already doing it, because sometimes that is the only true comfort available. A final series of pains may seem to tear time apart. Then the child comes suddenly or slowly, with relief and shock together. The midwife receives the baby in her hands. Those hands are the first human world the newborn touches, not gloves, not stainless steel. A woman's hands, warm from the room, rough from work, practiced in catching life as it arrives slippery, fragile and uncertain. For one suspended moment, everything waits for sound. A cry changes the room, not into safety, not yet, but into the possibility of joy. No cry changes it another way. The midwife bends over the baby. A woman brings cloth. Someone moves closer to the fire. The mother, drained and shaking, may ask what it is, whether it lives, whether it is whole. If the baby cries, someone tells her quickly. If it does not, there may be a silence before anyone answers, and that silence can be more merciless than words. Even when the cry comes, the mother's ordeal is not finished. The cord must be tied and cut. The afterbirth must come. The bleeding must be watched. The mother may tremble violently, as women often do after delivery, from shock, effort, cold, heat, fear, and the body's sudden change. She may be given something warm to drink. A cloth may be placed beneath her again. The baby may be wrapped and brought near or held aside while the midwife attends to the mother. Priorities can shift quickly. A living baby can draw every eye, but an experienced midwife knows to keep watching the woman on the bed. Too much celebration too soon is dangerous. The room must not relax before the body has declared itself finished with the birth. In that pause after delivery, prayer may return with gratitude or desperation. If mother and child seem well, thanks may be spoken aloud. If one is failing, the words become urgent again. In some communities, if a newborn seemed unlikely to live, baptism or emergency spiritual care could become immediate depending on religious practice. The child's soul mattered from the first breath, and sometimes before anyone was sure there would be a second. This is another place where modern instincts can misread the past. To us, the focus on the soul of a dying infant may seem severe or sorrowful in an unfamiliar way. To them, it was love shaped by belief. They wanted the child held by God if the world could not hold it. The heat remains. The fire still needs feeding. The women are tired now, even if the work continues. Their sleeves may be damp. Their backs ache. Their faces are shiny in the firelight. The floor needs cleaning. Cloths need sorting into what can be washed, what must be burned or buried, what can somehow be saved. The bedding must be changed if there is enough to change it. The mother must be settled. The baby must be warmed. Someone must tell the husband more than the sounds have already told him. Someone must check on the children. If the birth has gone well, the room may begin to loosen into talk, quiet laughter, tears, the stunned, practical happiness of people who know they have escaped something. If it has not gone well, the same hands that held and warmed and worked may now perform the first tasks of mourning. There is no professional staff to take the dead away into hidden corridors. The house that holds birth also holds death. The women who tried to bring life safely into the room may be the women who wash a body before burial. This is why their hands matter so much in the history of birth. They were not only hands of comfort, they were hands of witness. They touched the beginning and the ending of lives, often in the same room, often before breakfast. For the moment, stay inside the room while the air is still hot and the outcome is not yet fully known. The mother is breathing hard. The midwife is watching her more closely than anyone else realizes. The baby, if crying, is being rubbed dry and wrapped near the fire. Outside, dawn has strengthened enough to show the yard, the well, the fence, the path the midwife walked in darkness. The day has begun for the settlement, but inside this house the night's work has not loosened its grip. Everyone has seen again what birth requires when there is no pain relief and no true safety, only heat, fear, prayer, and the hands of women who know that the next danger may already be waiting in the blood, in the silence, or in the invisible fever that no one in 1690 yet understands. By the time the mother understands that the labour has truly taken hold, the idea of ordinary pain has already stopped being useful. A pulled muscle, a toothache, a burn from the hearth, a cut from a knife, even the deep soreness that follows a day of hauling water or bending over a wash tub, all of those pains have edges. They can be pointed to, they can be guarded. You can hold the injured place still and arrange the body around it. Labour pain does not behave that way. It begins somewhere low and internal, then gathers itself through the back, belly, hips, thighs, ribs and breath, until the whole body seems to have become the instrument of it. In 1690, a woman did not enter that pain with the knowledge that someone could soften it when it became too much. There was no epidural waiting behind a curtain, no spinal anaesthetic, no measured drip, no modern narcotic dose watched by trained staff, no button to press, no nurse checking a monitor and saying, "We can help with that now." Ether and chloroform were still far in the future as childbirth anaesthetics. The age of surgical anaesthesia had not arrived. A woman in this room had what the room could give her. A hand to grip, a body to lean against, a cup of something warm, the voice of the midwife, perhaps a little alcohol or an herbal preparation, prayer if she could form the words, and the ability of her own body to keep going after her mind had already begun to insist that it could not. That is the first truth to sit with. No pain relief did not mean no one cared about her pain. It meant there was no reliable way to remove it. The women around her may care deeply. They may wipe her face, support her weight, speak gently, rub her back, warm cloths by the fire, and watch her with concern that is entirely real. But the pain remains in the centre of the room like another person. Everyone must work around it because no one can send it away. Early labour may have begun almost politely, if that word can be used for such a thing. A tightening, a pause, a feeling that made the mother stop while setting down a cup or standing from a stool. Perhaps she said nothing at first. Women who had given birth before knew that not every pain meant immediate danger or immediate delivery. False pains, slow beginnings, long uncertain hours were all part of the experience. A woman late in pregnancy might have small pains for days and still not be in true labour. So at first she may have watched herself quietly. She may have continued with household tasks because stopping too soon could draw attention, and attention carried its own kind of pressure. She may have kneaded bread, folded cloth, stirred the fire, nursed another child, or tried to lie down while telling herself she would know when it was time. Then the pains found a rhythm. They returned with enough force that the room began to count them, not with a clock perhaps, but with household awareness. One while the fire was being stirred, one before the water boiled, one before the neighbour arrived, one so strong she had to grip the edge of the bed and breathe through her teeth. The first stage of labour could last many hours, especially for a first birth, and in 1690 those hours were spent without the modern reassurance of knowing exactly how far the cervix had opened, or whether the baby's heartbeat remained steady. Progress was guessed through signs. The mother's sounds changed, her posture changed, the pressure moved lower, the pains grew closer. The midwife might examine her, but not with sterile gloves, not with modern language, not with a chart. Much depended on judgment, and judgment could be good without being certain. For the woman herself, the uncertainty was part of the suffering. Pain is harder to bear when no one can tell you how much longer it will last. A modern person in pain often asks that question before almost any other. How long? How long until the medicine works? How long until surgery? How long until this is over? In the colonial birthing room, the honest answer was often that no one knew. The pain might build steadily and bring the child by dawn. It might surge and fade all day. It might stop and begin again. It might become the kind of long labour that frightened the room because the mother's strength was finite and every hour spent in pain used some of it. The women knew this. They tried to help her conserve herself. They told her not to cry out too much too early, not because screams offended them, but because breath and strength were practical resources. A labouring woman who spent herself in the first long hours might have nothing left when pushing began. That instruction can sound cruel now, as if the women were demanding silence for the sake of propriety. Sometimes there may have been propriety in it, because this was a culture that valued self-command and religious endurance, but much of it was practical. Save your breath, save your strength. Do not let fear use what your body will need later. The mother may have understood that and still been unable to obey. Labour pain does not always leave room for good behaviour. A contraction can make a person become only body for a minute, stripped of manners, plans and intentions. She may clutch the arm of the woman beside her and then apologise when the pain passes. She may say she cannot do it. She may ask whether something is wrong. She may ask for water, then push it away. She may be too hot near the fire and too cold when the sweat dries on her skin. She may tremble violently between pains. She may vomit from the intensity of labour, from exhaustion, from fear, or from whatever she's been given to drink. Someone cleans it. Someone shifts the cloth beneath her. Someone tells her to breathe. The pain returns before the room is ready. It always returns on its own schedule. There is a specific loneliness inside labour that even a crowded room cannot remove. That is not because the women around her are failing. It is because the work is happening inside her body. Others can hold her, but they cannot take one contraction for her. They can tell her the child is coming, but they cannot open the body in her place. They can pray, but the pain still passes through her nerves, muscles, bones, and mind. In 1690, that loneliness was sharpened by the absence of medical escape. She could not decide that the pain had become unacceptable and ask for a procedure to dull it. She could not be told that relief was 20 minutes away. She could not even be fully assured that terrible pain meant normal progress. Sometimes it did. Sometimes it did not. An obstructed labour could produce hours of agony with little movement toward birth. A poorly positioned baby could create pressure that felt purposeful but achieved nothing. Back labour, when the baby's position caused severe pain in the mother's lower back and spine, could make each contraction feel as though her bones were being forced apart from behind. Women in the past felt these things as women feel them now. Their bodies were not less sensitive because their lives were harder. This is worth repeating plainly. Hard work did not make childbirth painless. A woman who spent her life carrying water, scrubbing linen, tending animals, hauling wood, kneading dough and bearing cold without complaint did not become immune to the pain of labour. She may have had endurance. She may have had strong muscles. She may have been used to discomfort in a way many modern people are not. But labour is not merely discomfort. It is the body changing under force. It is tissue stretching, joints and ligaments straining, the uterus contracting with extraordinary power, the cervix opening, the baby descending against bone and muscle. A culture can teach a woman to interpret pain differently. It cannot remove the nerves. This is one of the quiet mistakes people make when they speak about historical women. They imagine endurance as evidence that suffering was smaller. Often it only means that suffering had fewer exits. The remedies available to her were limited and uneven. Some households used warm drinks, beer, cider, wine, or spirits in small amounts, though alcohol could comfort more than it truly relieved and could also weaken or nauseate a woman if used poorly. Herbs might be given according to local tradition. Some were meant to strengthen contractions, some to calm, some to bring warmth, some to settle the stomach, some to move a stalled labour. A few plant-based remedies had real physiological effects, though not always safe ones. Others belonged more to inherited belief than effective medicine. Opiates existed in the broader medical world. Laudanum, a tincture of opium in alcohol, was known in early modern medicine and used for pain in some contexts, especially by physicians and apothecaries. But this did not mean an ordinary labouring woman in a rural colonial house had safe, measured access to it. Even when opiate preparations were available, dosing, was uncertain, purity varied, and there was no modern understanding of respiratory depression, fetal effects, or controlled pain management during labour. Pain medicine, when present, could be risky, rare, expensive, or reserved for certain circumstances. It was not the dependable relief modern listeners might imagine. More often, the pain of childbirth was managed socially rather than medically. The room managed it by speech, touch, position, heat, pressure, and prayer. The midwife might tell her to walk if labour slowed and she had strength. Walking during labour was not a wellness choice. It could be an attempt to help the baby move down, to keep the mother from stiffening, to use gravity because gravity was one of the few tools available to everyone. But walking in labour is not gentle when contractions come hard. The mother may move across the room, bent forward, one hand on a woman's shoulder, one hand under her belly, stopping suddenly when the next pain grips her. She may lean against the wall, the table, a bedpost, or the body of a neighbour. She may rock or sway because stillness becomes unbearable. She may kneel because lying down worsens the pressure. She may beg to lie down because standing has exhausted her. The midwife must judge when movement helps and when it wastes strength. That judgment is made in the noise of the room, in the heat, with the mother suffering and everyone watching. Position was one form of relief, but relief is a relative word. A change of position might reduce one pain and deepen another. Squatting could help the descent but strain the legs until they shook. Sitting on a birthing stool could use gravity but intensify pressure in a way that made the woman feel split apart. Lying on the side might give rest but slow progress. Kneeling could ease the back but exhaust the arms. There was no perfect position because the problem was not posture alone. The problem was that the body had to deliver a child through a passage that could only open by labour. The women in the room may know this better than anyone. They do not speak of it delicately because they have no use for pretending. Birth is work and work hurts. As labour deepens, the pain begins to change character. Earlier pains may have had space between them, enough for the mother to speak, drink, weep, or sleep briefly. Later, the waves come closer until the rest between them barely feels like rest. This is the stage that can frighten a first-time mother most, because it seems impossible that the body can continue at that intensity without breaking. She may feel trapped inside the rhythm. Before one contraction has fully left, the next gathers. The room may blur, the fire, the faces, the ceiling beams, the midwife's voice. All of it becomes something she enters and leaves according to pain. She may no longer care who sees her. She may no longer control the sounds she makes. She may groan from somewhere low in the chest, cry out sharply, whisper prayers, or grow silent in a way that makes the women lean closer. Silence can mean focus. It can mean exhaustion. It can mean fear has gone past words. The midwife reads it as best she can. In a religious household, the interpretation of pain could carry moral weight. Many colonial women were taught that childbirth pain was part of woman's lot after the fall, a punishment and a trial woven into the order of the world. That belief did not prevent compassion, but it could make pain seem inevitable in a spiritual sense. A woman might be encouraged to bear it patiently, to submit, to remember God, to offer her suffering with humility. Some women may have found strength in this. Others may have felt crushed by it. Most probably experienced both at different moments. Faith can comfort a person in pain, and it can also make her feel watched by expectations she cannot meet. If she screamed too much, did that mean weakness? If she feared death, did that mean lack of trust? If she felt anger, would God judge her? These are not small questions inside a Puritan or deeply Protestant world where the state of the soul mattered intensely. The labouring woman did not only endure physical pain, she endured it while living inside a framework that gave that pain religious meaning. The women around her may remind her to pray. They may pray for her when she cannot. They may interpret a safe delivery as mercy, a death as providence, a long labour as trial. To modern ears that can sound severe. To them, It was part of making sense of the uncontrollable. Pain without meaning is terrifying. Pain with meaning can still be terrifying, but it is not empty. Then comes the bearing down stage, and if the first part of labour was a siege, this part is a demand. The body begins to push, not politely, not when everyone is ready. The urge may feel overwhelming, like vomiting turned downward, a force that takes the body from inside and makes refusal almost impossible. The mother may say she needs to pass stool, a common sign that the baby has descended and is pressing hard. The midwife understands. Cloths are moved. Women take positions. The mother is told when to bear down, when to wait, when to use the pain. That phrase matters because a contraction becomes both enemy and tool. She may dread it and need it at the same time. Without it, the baby does not come. With it, she may feel she is being torn open. There is no clean way to describe this without losing the truth. The final descent of a baby can produce burning, stretching pains so intense that many women across time have believed in that moment that the body could not survive it. In modern birth, this may happen even with support and preparation. In 1690, there was no anaesthetic veil over it. The mother felt the pressure against the bones of the pelvis, the stretching of the perineum, the tearing if tearing occurred, the bruising, the rawness, the impossible fullness of the child crowning. If the baby moved steadily, the pain had direction. If it moved and retreated, appeared and disappeared between pushes, the mother might feel both hope and despair every few minutes. The midwife might support the tissues with her hand, speak sharply, tell her not to push too fast, or urge her to push harder if the child seemed near and the mother was failing. But control was limited. If the body tore, it tore. There were no modern surgical repairs done under clean anaesthetised conditions. Tears might be stitched in some circumstances with whatever skill and materials were available, or they might be left to heal as they could. Severe tearing could affect a woman for the rest of her life. Pain did not necessarily end when the child was born. For some women, it became a lasting injury hidden under daily work. This is another part of the history we do not talk about enough. Survival could include damage. A woman might live, and everyone would say she had been safely delivered, while she continued with pain, incontinence, prolapse, infection, sexual injury, weakness, or fear of the next pregnancy. The record might show success because the mother did not die. It would not show what living cost her. The absence of pain relief during labour was only the beginning. There was little relief afterward either. A torn body still had to nurse, bleed, sleep in short fragments, and eventually resume household labour. The midwife might advise rest, but rest depended on class, help, season, and family need. The body's suffering was expected to be folded back into the work of the household. During pushing, the room itself may become louder. Women repeat instructions. The mother groans or cries out. The fire snaps. A child elsewhere in the house begins crying and is hushed. The husband hears enough to know the moment has changed. He may stand outside the door, useless and terrified, perhaps praying, perhaps gripping his own hands, perhaps hearing his wife make sounds he has never heard from her before. But again, he is not the centre of the pain. She is. The women around her may use their bodies to help her push, pulling under her arms, bracing her feet, holding her upright on the stool, or supporting her as she squats. This is not graceful. It is labour in the plainest sense. Sweat runs, muscles shake. The mother may lose control of urine or bowels, which is common in childbirth and would be cleaned without ceremony. Modesty becomes impractical, but shame may still flicker through her when the pain lets her think. One gift experienced women could give was not reacting. They had seen bodies do what bodies do. Their calm could protect her from humiliation. In a world that demanded female modesty, the birthroom created a temporary mercy. The body was allowed to be a body because denying that fact would endanger everyone. The final pushes may come with a fear that is almost animal. Not abstract fear, not a thought about mortality, but the immediate bodily conviction that something is too much. The mother may pull back from the pain just as she needs to push into it. The midwife may tell her firmly that she must not draw away now. If the baby's head is visible, the room is close to either relief or crisis. A living baby can still be lost in these moments. A mother can still bleed. A shoulder can catch. The cord can be tight. The baby can emerge silent. The mother can faint. Everything is near and nothing is guaranteed. The woman may feel the ring of fire as the head crowns, the stretching so intense it becomes almost a separate pain from the contractions themselves. Then, with one more push or several, the head may be born. There is no instant ease yet. The body still must deliver the shoulders, then the rest of the child. Sometimes the body follows quickly, almost suddenly, and the room shifts with the shock of arrival. Sometimes the shoulders delay, and the midwife must work with urgency, trying what she knows, changing position, guiding, pulling carefully or not carefully enough because time is short and knowledge is limited. For the mother, those moments may be a blur of pressure, instruction, and fear. Then the child is out, and the pain changes again. Not gone, changed. The emptiness after birth can feel like collapse. The uterus still contracts. The afterbirth must separate and be delivered. The mother may shake uncontrollably. The raw tissues burn. If she has torn, every movement hurts. If she has laboured for many hours, exhaustion may be so deep that she cannot lift her head to see the baby. Yet the room's attention may swing toward the newborn, especially if the child does not cry. That swing can be frightening for the mother. She may ask again and again, does it live? If no one answers quickly, she understands too much. If the cry comes, relief may pass through her with such force that she weeps, laughs, or simply closes her eyes. But even joy has to share space with pain. The after pains begin, especially for women who have given birth before. These contractions of the uterus after delivery can be severe, and in a world without reliable pain relief, they are endured as part of the same ordeal. The midwife may press on the belly to judge whether the womb is firming, a necessary action that can hurt sharply. If bleeding is heavy, the pressing may become more urgent. The mother, who thought the worst might be over, may be told to bear more pain because the room is still trying to keep her alive. This is one of the cruel surprises of birth in any era. But in 1690 it could feel especially endless. First the labour, then the pushing, then the tearing or bruising, then the afterbirth, then the uterine pains, then the first attempts to nurse, which could bring their own cramping and soreness. No part of the body is asked politely. Everything is demanded. What could women do with that level of pain when no true relief existed? They did what people have always done when trapped in unavoidable suffering. They broke time into smaller pieces. One pain, one breath, one instruction, one sip, one prayer, one push. The women around the mother helped create those pieces. They did not say, "You have many hours left," because that would be unbearable. And they said, "This one." They said, "Now." They said, "Again." They gave the pain edges when medicine could not. That may sound small, but it is one of the most important forms of human care. When suffering cannot be removed, someone can still stand close enough to help you survive the next minute. The colonial birthing room understood this out of necessity. It was not gentle in the modern therapeutic sense. It did not always use words we would choose, but it knew the value of presence. A woman alone in labour faced not only pain, but panic, cold, confusion, and the practical impossibility of helping herself at crucial moments. A woman surrounded by experienced hands still suffered, but she suffered inside a structure of attention. That structure could save her. Not always, but sometimes. The psychological pain also deserves a place here because childbirth in 1690 carried memories into the room. A woman may have watched a sister die in childbed. She may have helped wash a neighbour after a fatal delivery. She may have lost a baby before and feared the silence more than the pain. She may know that if she dies, her children will need another woman quickly, perhaps a stepmother, perhaps relatives, perhaps hired or enslaved labour if the family can command it. She may wonder who will nurse the baby if she cannot. Wet nurses existed, but access depended on circumstance, and many infants without mothers were in danger from the first day. The pain of labour may therefore be threaded with thoughts no one hears. Do not let me leave the children. Let this one breathe. Let me live until morning. Let the bleeding stop. Let the midwife's face stay calm. In some moments, fear of death may be stronger than fear of pain. In others, pain may become so complete that death is not a thought, only the next contraction. These shifts happen inside the mother while the room sees only her body working. There is a tendency in old records to compress all of this into a sentence. A woman was delivered of a son. A woman was brought to bed. A woman died in childbed. The language is tidy because records prefer outcomes. They do not record the hour when she begged for the pain to stop. They do not record the neighbour's bruised hand where she was gripped. They do not record the vomit, the shaking, the sweat, the terror when the baby did not descend, the relief that made someone sit down suddenly on the floor because her knees gave way. They do not record whether the mother said she could not do it and then did it. They do not record whether she felt ashamed of screaming. They do not record whether she slept afterward or lay awake listening to the baby breathe because she could not believe both of them had survived. That is why we have to linger in the room longer than the record does, not to invent what cannot be known about one specific woman, but to restore the scale of what the words delivered of a child conceal. No pain relief in 1690 meant the body met birth directly. No safety meant that pain could not be cleanly separated from danger. In modern settings, severe pain can still be frightening, but often someone can say, "The baby is tolerating labour," or "Your blood pressure is stable," or "We're going to help you now." In the colonial room, severe pain might be normal, or it might be the beginning of disaster. The mother might not know. The midwife might suspect but not be certain. This uncertainty made the pain heavier. Every prolonged hour asked the same question. Is this the work of birth, or is something wrong? If the child finally came alive and the mother's bleeding stayed within what the midwife considered safe, the room could reinterpret the pain as ordeal survived. If the child did not come, or came too late, or came with the mother already failing, then those same hours became the memory of helplessness. The difference might not be clear until the end. As the mother lies back or sags against the women holding her, the room does not become peaceful all at once. Pain still lives in her body. Her thighs shake, her back throbs, her belly cramps. If she has torn, she burns. If she has lost blood, she may feel cold even in the overheated room. The newborn's cry, if it comes, cuts through everything with a sound that is both ordinary and astonishing. Someone laughs softly, someone thanks God, someone tells the father. The midwife stays near the mother because she knows better than to trust the first moment of relief. Pain has brought the child out, but blood can still take the woman. A body that has opened must close. A womb that has emptied must contract. A placenta that should separate cleanly may not. The same woman who endured the full force of labour without relief may now be asked to endure more hands on her belly, more instruction, more waiting, more fear. This is where the next danger begins to gather, not in a dramatic new scene, but in the same bed, under the same damp linen, while the room is still warm from the fire, and everyone is still listening to decide whether the sounds they hear now belong to recovery or to something going wrong. The first thing the midwife watches after the child is born is not the baby's face for very long, even if everyone else wants to look there. The baby matters, of course. A cry matters. Movement matters. Warmth matters. But an experienced woman in 1690 knows that the mother can still be lost in the same room where everyone has just begun to feel relief. That is one of the most difficult truths about childbirth before modern medicine. Birth did not end when the child came out. It changed shape. The danger moved from the long work of labour into blood, weakness, retained afterbirth, torn tissue, fever and infection. Some of these dangers could be seen quickly. Some of them waited. Some were already present on hands, cloth, bedding or instruments, invisible to everyone, moving quietly through a room that believed it had done everything it could to be careful. The mother may lie back, shaking, her face pale and wet, her hair stuck to her forehead, her body emptied by effort. The baby may be wrapped near the hearth, making small, sharp sounds that cause the room to loosen for a moment. Someone may smile. Someone may whisper thanks. A neighbour woman may wipe her eyes with the back of her wrist and then return to work because the bed still has to be watched. The midwife's attention stays low, practical and serious. Has the afterbirth come? Is the womb tightening as it should? Is the blood slowing? Does the mother answer when spoken to? Is her skin warm, cold, grey, flushed? Is she sleepy from exhaustion? Or is she slipping somewhere she cannot be called back from? These are not questions written on a chart. They are questions held in the eyes and hands of women who have seen births end well, and births turn suddenly. Blood was expected. No one in that room thought birth was clean. A woman could not deliver a child without blood, fluids, soiled cloths, and the heavy work of washing afterward. But too much blood changed everything. Hemorrhage was one of the great terrors of childbirth in the colonial world because it moved faster than almost any other danger. Infection might take days to reveal itself. A fever might creep upward slowly. But bleeding could take a woman while the child was still being wrapped. It could turn a room from relief to panic in minutes. The midwife had no blood transfusion to replace what was lost. She had no modern medications to make the uterus clamp down. She had no operating room, no intravenous fluids, no surgical team. She had hands, pressure, positioning, perhaps herbal remedies believed to help, cloths that filled too quickly, and the urgent need to make the womb contract. She might massage the mother's belly, pressing hard over a body that had already endured more pain than anyone should have to bear. The mother might cry out because this pressure could be brutal on a raw and exhausted body. But pain after birth could be necessary pain. If the womb did not firm, if it stayed soft and open, blood could continue to pour from the place where the placenta had been attached. The women might not explain it in modern anatomical language, but they knew enough to be afraid when the bleeding did not slow. They knew the feel of a woman fading, a face draining of colour, lips losing warmth, eyes that could no longer focus, a voice growing thin, a hand that had gripped with force now lying open and cold. The midwife may call for more cloths, and that call alone could make the room understand the danger. More cloths meant the first cloths were not enough. More cloths meant the bed was becoming something no one wanted to name. More cloths meant the mother's life was leaving in a visible way, and everyone could see it, and no one had the power to pour it back into her. Retained placenta was another fear. The afterbirth had to come away from the body after the baby, and if it did not, the room could not relax. A modern listener may think of the placenta as a simple final detail, something handled quietly after the main event. In 1690, it could be the difference between recovery and death. If it remained inside, or if part of it remained, the womb might not close properly. Bleeding could continue. Infection could follow. The midwife knew the afterbirth mattered. She might examine it as best she could, looking to see whether it seemed whole. That inspection was one of the few ways she had to judge whether something dangerous had been left behind. If it did not come, she might wait, encourage the mother, use remedies, massage, position, or, in desperate cases, attempt manual removal with all the risks that carried in a world without sterile technique. Imagine the mother in that moment. She has survived the pain of labour. She has perhaps heard her child cry. She may believe she has crossed the worst of it. Then the midwife's face remains serious. The women do not disperse. The bed is still being watched. Someone tells her she must bear more. The body she thought had finished is asked to open again to hands, pressure, pain, and fear. This is where survival could feel almost unfair. Birth gave no clean ending. It offered thresholds, one after another, and the mother had to cross each before anyone could truly say she was safe. Even if the bleeding slowed and the afterbirth was delivered, danger could remain in places no one knew how to see. Infection was perhaps the most frightening danger, precisely because it could hide behind success. A woman could deliver a living child. She could be cleaned, settled, congratulated, given warm drink, and tucked beneath blankets. The room could be restored slowly to its ordinary shape. The midwife could leave. The neighbours could return home with the story of a hard but successful birth. The father could look at the baby and begin to imagine a future. Then, a day or two later, the mother might begin to shiver. At first, it might be explained as weakness, cold, milk coming in, exhaustion, or the natural cost of labour. Then the fever would rise. Her belly might become tender. The discharge from the womb might smell foul. She might grow restless, confused, flushed, then pale. The women around her might recognise the pattern with dread. Childbed fever, puerperal fever, septic illness after birth, whatever words people used or did not use for it, was one of the great killers of mothers before antisepsis and antibiotics. In 1690, no one understood germs. That sentence is simple, but its consequences are enormous. No one in that room knew that invisible organisms could travel from unwashed hands to torn tissue, from soiled cloth to the uterus, from one patient to another, from a blade to a wound. People had ideas about cleanliness, but cleanliness meant something different from sterility. A cloth could be washed and still carry danger. Hands could be rinsed and still carry danger. A midwife could attend one woman with infection, and then another birth without understanding that she might carry death between them. A physician could move from an autopsy, a wound, or a sickbed to a labouring woman, and believe himself respectable and careful while carrying the very thing that would kill her. The science that would make this visible would not arrive for a long time. Germ theory, antiseptic practice, and the medical transformation that followed belonged to the 19th century, not the world of 1690. In the room we are imagining, the danger has no face. It has no smell at the moment it arrives. It does not announce itself when it enters a tear or the raw surface inside the womb. It simply begins. This is what makes the history so hard to sit with. The women may do what they honestly believe is right. They may heat water. They may use the cleanest linen available. They may keep the room warm. They may protect the mother from drafts. They may pray. They may avoid needless exposure. They may work with real skill and real care. And still, something too small to see may already have crossed into her body. The fever that follows might be interpreted through the medical beliefs of the time. People might speak of bad air, corrupted fluids, imbalance, weakness after labour, retained matter, exposure to cold or God's will. Humoral medicine still shaped much early modern thinking. The body was understood through balances of blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile, heat, cold, dryness, and moisture. Illness could be explained as imbalance or corruption rather than invasion by microbes. A woman with fever after birth might be treated in ways that did not help, and sometimes harmed. Bleeding, purging, sweating, cordials, poultices, herbal drinks and prayers might all appear depending on who was called and what they believed. Some remedies may have given comfort or hydration. Others could weaken a woman already fighting for her life, but the people around her were not doing nothing because they were indifferent. They were acting inside a medical world that had not yet learned what it needed to know. That is a different tragedy. Ignorance is not always laziness. Sometimes it's a locked door, and generations of people live and die before someone finds the key. The birthing bed was especially vulnerable because the mother's body after delivery was full of openings and injuries, both visible and hidden. The place where the placenta had attached inside the womb was essentially a wound. The cervix had opened. The birth canal might be bruised, torn, abraded. Hands may have entered to examine or assist. Cloths had touched blood and tissue. The room was not sterile. The air carried smoke and dust. The bedding might contain old straw, old feathers, old wool, old human use. Even the best household could not create a modern sterile field. Poor households had fewer linens, fewer chances to wash thoroughly, less space, more crowding, and more exposure to cold and damp. If the mother was enslaved, her access to rest, clean bedding, and attentive care depended on a system that treated her body as labour and property. If she was a servant, she might be expected to return to work quickly. If she was a free woman in a hard-pressed household, need itself might push her out of bed before her body had recovered. Infection did not care which explanation brought a woman to danger. It only needed entry. The midwife's knowledge could reduce some risks without anyone understanding microbes. Experience taught that foul discharges were bad. Experience taught that a woman whose belly grew painful and whose fever rose was in serious trouble. Experience taught that retained afterbirth was dangerous. Experience taught that cleanliness mattered in a practical sense. Some midwives may have been careful in ways that saved lives, washing cloth, keeping bedding as clean as possible, limiting unnecessary handling, warming the mother, watching for signs. Others may have used practices that increased danger, not from malice, but because the wrong ideas had been handed down as useful. This was a world where knowledge travelled by apprenticeship, household tradition, printed receipt books, community memory, and sometimes male medical theory. Good knowledge and bad knowledge could sit side by side in the same room. A woman might be protected by one inherited practice and harmed by another. No one could separate them with certainty. Internal injury was another danger that records often hide behind mild language. A difficult birth could leave a woman torn, bruised, swollen and damaged in ways that shape the rest of her life. The baby's head pressing for hours against soft tissue could cause injury to the bladder or rectum. Severe obstructed labour could create fistulas, leaving women with chronic leakage and infection, a devastating condition in any era and especially in a society where smell, cleanliness, and female respectability mattered deeply. Pelvic injury could make walking painful. Prolapse could follow repeated births. Tears could heal badly. A woman might survive and still never be the same, but if she did not die, the records might say she recovered. Recovery is a word that can hide more than it reveals. In the household, a recovered woman may simply be one who can stand again, nurse the child, stir the pot, mend the linen and return to the work waiting for her. The body's private suffering could be absorbed into daily life until it disappeared from public memory. When we talk about safety, this matters. Safety is not only not dying. Safety is being able to heal without being forced too soon back into labour. Safety is having injuries treated effectively. Safety is having pain believed. Safety is not losing one's future to damage everyone politely ignores. In 1690, most women did not have that kind of safety. Obstructed labour belongs here too, because blood and infection often followed from births that went on too long or required desperate intervention. If the baby was too large, badly positioned, or trapped by the shape of the mother's pelvis, the room could enter a long and terrible waiting. The pains might continue. The mother might push until she had no strength left. The baby might weaken or die before delivery. The mother could become dehydrated, feverish, exhausted, and injured by the pressure of the child that could not pass. In modern medicine, obstructed labour may lead to caesarean delivery, instrumental delivery, careful monitoring, fluids, antibiotics, blood, and surgical repair. In 1690, options were grim. Caesarean operation on a living woman was not a safe routine procedure. In most early modern contexts, cutting a child from the womb was associated with the mother already dead or dying, and survival was extraordinarily rare. Male practitioners with instruments existed in parts of Europe and the colonies, but availability was limited, and the use of instruments carried serious risks. The famous obstetric forceps developed by the Chamberlain family had been kept secret in the 17th century and were not broadly available to ordinary midwives. For most colonial women, especially in rural homes, a baby that could not be delivered naturally meant terror, improvisation, and often death. That is not melodrama. It is the practical consequence of anatomy meeting a world without surgery as we know it. The midwife might try repositioning the mother. She might encourage squatting, kneeling, side-lying, standing, or pulling against a rope. She might try to turn the child if she recognised the position and had the skill, though such attempts could be dangerous and intensely painful. If the baby presented breech, by the feet or buttocks, some midwives had experience delivering such births, but the risk was high. If the arm came first, or the shoulder lodged, or the head could not pass, the room darkened in mood even if the sun outside was high. There are few forms of helplessness more severe than knowing what must happen for survival, and seeing no way to make it happen. The mother's cries might weaken over time, not because the pain lessened, but because she was being used up. The women around her might shift from encouragement to pleading. The midwife might send for a man with instruments if one could be found, but by the time he arrived, the mother and child might already be beyond help. The distance between a complication and help was measured not only in miles, but in the limits of the age itself. Then there was eclampsia, though they would not have used our modern understanding of it. A pregnant or labouring woman could develop seizures from a condition related to dangerously high blood pressure. To the people around her, it might look sudden, terrifying, and mysterious. A woman could complain of headache, swelling, visual disturbances, or simply seem unwell, and then convulse. In a colonial household, such a seizure might be interpreted through religious fear, humoral imbalance, fits, or other explanations. There was no magnesium sulfate, no blood pressure monitoring, no ability to induce or deliver safely under modern control. A seizure in the birthing room could throw everyone into panic. The mother might injure herself, the baby might be in danger, the midwife might know some practical responses from experience, keeping the mother from falling, clearing space, calling for help, but she could not treat the underlying condition as modern medicine does. Again, the danger was not only that bad things happened, it was that bad things happened in a world with very few ways to interrupt them. We should also remember the dangers of postpartum weakness in a household that still had to function. A woman who lost a moderate amount of blood, by modern standards perhaps enough to be watched, treated, given fluids and supported, might in 1690 simply be put to bed and hoped over. If she was pale, faint, and unable to stand, the family had to adjust. Someone else had to cook. Someone else had to nurse or find milk if the mother could not. Someone else had to care for older children. But households did not always have enough people to absorb that work. A woman might be encouraged to rest for a lying-in period, especially if she had female relatives or neighbours to help. And in some communities this support was real. Food might be brought. Visitors might come. The mother might remain in bed for days or weeks, depending on custom and circumstance. But need could shorten recovery. Poverty could shorten recovery. Enslavement could nearly erase recovery. A body weakened by blood loss was more vulnerable to infection, failed lactation, depression, exhaustion, and further decline. The line between surviving birth and returning to life was not one clean step. It was a slow negotiation between the body's injuries and the household's demands. Depression and mental disturbance after birth also existed, even if described in very different language. A woman who survived a terrifying labour might not simply feel grateful. She might feel fear, sadness, agitation, numbness, or dread. She might be haunted by a baby who died, or by the pain she endured, or by the knowledge that pregnancy could come again. In a religious culture, dark thoughts after birth might be interpreted as spiritual struggle, melancholy, weakness, temptation, or bodily imbalance. There was little space to speak of trauma as we might now. Yet the experience of trauma does not require modern vocabulary. A woman can be changed by fear even when her community calls the birth successful. If she wakes at night sweating, if she flinches at the baby's cry because it returns her to the room, if she feels grief where others expect joy, those feelings belong to the history too. Records rarely preserve them because records did not know how to value them. The dangers no one could see were not only microbes, they were also the lasting effects no one thought to record. The mother's body was expected to become useful again. Her mind was expected to settle into gratitude and duty. Sometimes it did, sometimes it did not. One of the most haunting features of colonial childbirth is how quickly a woman's death could become part of a household's practical problem. If she died, the grief was real. Let us not doubt that. Husbands mourned wives, children mourned mothers. Neighbour women remembered the bed, the last words, the baby's cry or silence. But a household without a mother could not remain suspended in mourning. Infants needed milk, children needed food, clothing needed mending, firewood needed managing, gardens needed planting. A widower with small children often remarried quickly, not necessarily because love had been shallow, but because the household required a woman's labour to survive. That reality can feel harsh to us, but it reveals the economic importance of the person who had been lost. A mother's death was not only a personal tragedy, it was a structural collapse. The work she'd done every day became visible the moment no one was there to do it. In that sense, childbirth was not a private medical event. It was a risk taken by the entire household, though the woman paid the highest price. The community knew this, which is why women came when called. Attendance at birth was not only kindness. It was communal risk management in a world where losing one mother could ripple through families, neighbours, labour arrangements, and survival itself. If fever began after birth, the house changed again. The birthing room became a sick room. The baby's small needs continued beside the mother's decline. The linens had to be changed, the fire watched, drinks prepared, sweats induced or cooled depending on belief. Visitors might come quietly. A minister might be sent for if the mother seemed near death. Prayers returned with a different sound. During labour, prayers asked for delivery. During fever, they asked for sparing, or preparation, or mercy. The mother herself might drift in and out. She might ask for the baby. She might not recognise the women around her. She might speak of God, of fear, of thirst, of heat. If sepsis took hold, the body could become a place of confusion. Rapid pulse, chills, fever, foul discharge, abdominal pain, weakness, delirium. The women watching may not know the mechanism, but they know the direction. They have seen fever carry women away. They may remember another house, another bed, another baby left motherless. The midwife, if called back, may arrive with the heavy knowledge that her earlier work did not end the danger. She may wonder whether anything she did contributed, though the language for that worry might be different. She may blame retained matter, chill, corruption, God's will, the mother's weakness, the hard labour, the weather. Without germ theory, guilt had no clear path, but grief found one anyway. Birth attendants across history carried memories of women they could not save. Some dangers were visible but misunderstood. Some were invisible and therefore almost impossible to fight. That is the phrase to hold on to. The dangers no one could see. Not because they were subtle in their effects, but because their causes were hidden. A dirty blade could look clean. A helpful hand could carry infection. A crowded room could feel supportive while increasing exposure. A warm, enclosed space could protect from cold while trapping foul air. A remedy could comfort while worsening dehydration. A physician could arrive with confidence and introduce instruments that tore tissue or carried contamination. A midwife could act from experience and still lack the missing piece of knowledge that would have changed everything. The horror is not that people in 1690 did not care whether mothers lived. Many cared intensely. The horror is that caring did not create antibiotics. Love did not create transfusion. Skill did not create germ theory. Prayer did not create antisepsis. A woman could be surrounded by concern and still die from something everyone in the room was touching but no one understood. And yet the room was not without intelligence. It is important not to confuse limited medicine with foolishness. Colonial. Women noticed patterns. They knew some births were more dangerous than others. First births could be hard. Very young mothers could be at risk. Women who had bled before were watched. Long labours were feared. Foul smells after birth were dreaded. Weakness, chills, and fever were serious. A midwife's reputation depended on what she noticed and remembered. The women's network around birth was a living archive of practical observation. It simply lacked the laboratory knowledge that would later explain why some observations mattered. They could see that one woman sickened after a difficult delivery. They could see that another recovered after a clean and quick birth. They could see that a retained afterbirth often led to trouble. They could not see bacteria multiplying in tissue. They could not culture infection. They could not know that hand-washing with antiseptic methods would transform maternal survival. They were looking at shadows cast by causes hidden from them. Sometimes they responded well to the shadow. Sometimes they chased the wrong one. As the hours after delivery pass, the mother's bed becomes a place of continual assessment. Someone checks the cloth beneath her. Someone asks whether she's thirsty. Someone touches her face. Someone notes whether she sleeps normally or seems hard to wake. The baby may root at the breast, and the first attempts at nursing bring another set of concerns. If the mother can nurse, the child has a better chance. If she's too weak, if the milk does not come, if the nipples crack and infect, if the baby cannot latch, the household must find another solution quickly. A newborn in 1690 cannot wait long without nourishment and warmth. So even the mother's bleeding and fever are tied to the infant's survival. One body's danger becomes another body's danger. The cord between mother and child has been cut, but dependence remains immediate and practical. A sick mother means a vulnerable newborn. A dead mother means a baby whose future depends on other women's milk, other women's time, and the household's ability to keep one more fragile life alive. The midwife knows this too, which is why her eyes move between the bed and the bundle near the hearth. There may be a moment when everything seems well enough. The mother has not bled too much. The afterbirth is accounted for. The baby has cried and warmed. The room begins the long work of cleaning. The father has been told. The children may be allowed near, perhaps one at a time, quiet and wide-eyed. A neighbour woman carries away a basin. Another shakes out a cloth. The fire is lowered slightly because the room has become too hot. Someone prepares broth, porridge, caudle, or another warm, strengthening drink, depending on custom and household means. The mother closes her eyes. The baby makes small sounds. The room exhales. But beneath that relief is a caution learned through generations. The women know the next days matter. They know that a woman who looks peaceful now may be in fever by tomorrow night. They know that a baby who cries now may fail to thrive. They know the bleeding must continue to slow. The milk must come. The mother must pass water. The belly must not grow hard and painful. The discharge must not turn foul. The chills must not begin. They know without knowing enough. That is the painful balance of the period. Experience gave warning. Medicine could not always answer it. So the mother is settled into a fragile watchfulness. Perhaps she sleeps. Perhaps she cannot because pain still moves through her hips and belly. Perhaps she listens to the baby breathe, each small sound proof of life and reminder of responsibility. Perhaps she feels relief so deep it nearly empties her. Perhaps she feels only exhaustion. Around her, the women keep working. There are cloths to rinse in cold water that may stain their hands red. There is bedding to change. There is the afterbirth to dispose of according to local custom, perhaps buried, perhaps otherwise handled with beliefs attached to it. There is the cord stump to manage. There is a room to return gradually from crisis to household. But the household is not the same. It has either gained a life, lost one, or nearly lost one, and the women inside it know how thin the difference can be. In the stillness after the worst of the immediate danger appears to pass, the hidden danger remains. It is on the edge of the bed, in the warmth of the room, in the mother's torn tissue, in the cloths waiting to be washed, in the hands that have done their best. No one can see it. No one can name it properly. No one can promise it has not entered. And while the mother lies there between survival and uncertainty, the newborn begins its own first test in the world, a test measured not by a doctor's score or chart, but by breath, warmth, colour, crying, sucking, and the anxious attention of women who understand that being born alive is only the first fragile victory. The newborn's first hour in 1690 did not begin with a clean announcement, a chart, a weight, a score, or a nurse carrying the child to a prepared station under warm light. It began in someone's hands, usually the midwife's hands, in a room that was too hot near the fire and too cold near the walls, with steam in the air, smoke in the rafters, blood on cloth, and every person listening for one sound above all others. The cry. That first cry mattered more than almost anything in the room for a few seconds, because it told the women that air had entered the baby's body, and that the child had crossed the first narrow bridge between the womb and the world. We have become used to birth being measured quickly and clinically. Colour, breathing, pulse, reflex, muscle tone, temperature, oxygen, weight, length, time of birth, all of it gathered and recorded by people trained to notice danger before it fully declares itself. In 1690, there was no such system. A baby was judged by signs anyone in that room could see or hear if they knew what to look for. Did it cry? Did it move? Was the skin flushing with life or remaining dark and still? Was the body limp or fighting? Did the mouth open? Did the chest rise? Did warmth begin to hold? These were not sentimental observations. They were survival measurements made without instruments, in firelight or grey dawn, while the mother lay nearby still bleeding, still shaking, still not safe herself. A crying baby could make the whole room exhale, but relief was never complete. The child who cried could still grow cold. The child who moved could still fail to suck. The child who looked strong could sicken in the night. Being born alive was only the first victory, and everyone who had buried infants knew how small that victory could be. If the baby did not cry at once, the room changed. The midwife might lower her head over the child, clear mucus from the mouth as best she knew, rub the baby firmly with cloth, turn the body, slap or stimulate the feet or back, hold the child close to warmth, speak sharply as if the infant could be summoned into life by command. Another woman might bring a warmed cloth from the hearth. Someone might pray aloud. Someone else might tell the mother to wait before asking again, which would tell her everything. There was no suction bulb, no oxygen, no neonatal resuscitation team, no incubator, no bag mask ventilation, no modern understanding of how to support a baby who needed help, making the transition to breathing. There were hands, cloth, warmth, breath perhaps in some forms of attempted revival, and urgency. If the baby finally cried after a long pause, the sound could feel almost violent in its mercy. If no cry came, the silence spread through the room in a way no one forgot. A mother who had endured labour without pain relief could lose the child before she had even seen its face clearly. The women might still try. They might rub the small chest, warm the body, clear the mouth again, pray, wait for some twitch or gasp. But the line between life and death in that first hour could be impossibly thin, and in 1690 there was often no way to know why one child crossed it and another did not. Some babies were born too early. Some had been deprived of air during a long labour. Some were injured in delivery. Some were weakened by infection, malformation, or conditions no one could diagnose. Some simply did not breathe, and the room could only turn from work to grief with the same hands that had tried to save them. For the baby who did cry, the next danger was cold. This may seem small to a modern listener because cold is something we usually think of as discomfort rather than immediate threat. But for a newborn in a colonial house, temperature was one of the first battles. A newborn arrives wet with a large surface area for its size, unable to regulate warmth well, and dependent on other bodies in the environment. Today, warm towels, heated rooms, hats, skin-to-skin care, and infant warmers are normal parts of birth care. In 1690, warmth came from the hearth, from cloth that had been warmed near the fire, from swaddling, and from being held close to a living body. The same room that had felt suffocating to the labouring mother might still contain drafts along the floor. A door open too long could pull cold air across the infant. A winter birth in a poorly sealed house could turn dangerous quickly if the baby was not dried and wrapped. The midwife or an attending woman would wipe the child, not with sterile gauze, but with whatever clean or clean enough linen was available. Perhaps old soft cloth saved for this purpose. The baby might be wrapped tightly, both to preserve heat and because swaddling was believed to shape, calm, and support the infant. Swaddling in the early modern world was not the loose blanket wrap many parents use now. It could be firm, sometimes very restrictive, binding the baby's limbs close to the body in long bands. People believed this helped the infant grow straight, prevented injury, kept the child quiet, and made handling easier. Practices varied by place and family, but the basic goal was the same: contain the fragile body, keep it warm, and bring order to a creature that had just arrived from the most disorderly event in the household. The baby's cord had to be tied and cut. That small act carried risks no one fully understood. The midwife might use thread, tape, or a strip of linen to tie the cord, then cut it with a knife or scissors. The blade might be cleaned in a household sense, maybe wiped, maybe heated, maybe simply taken from what was available. Sterility was not part of the world's knowledge. The cord stump could become infected. An infection in a newborn could move quickly. A child might be born strong and then sicken because danger entered through that raw little opening. People noticed when cord stumps became foul or when babies developed fever, weakness, or swelling, but they did not know microbes. They had practices, some careful and some harmful, some drawn from experience and others from custom. Something might be applied to the cord stump depending on local belief. The baby might be washed, wiped, oiled, salted, wrapped, prayed over, or treated according to the habits of the community. Some of these acts were meant to protect, some may have increased risk. The tragedy, again, is that love and danger could occupy the same gesture. A woman could do something tender because her mother had done it before her, and that tender act could carry unseen hazard. Once wrapped, the infant might be brought near the mother if she was strong enough, or held by another woman if the mother still needed urgent care. This is one of the places where our modern emotional expectations can mislead us. We imagine the baby immediately laid on the mother's chest, the room pausing around the new bond. That may happen in some form if mother and child are both well and the household custom allows it, but in 1690 the midwife's first obligations are practical. If the mother is bleeding too much, the baby may be held aside. If the afterbirth has not come, the mother cannot simply drift into a peaceful first hour. If the baby is cold or weak, another woman may take over warming while the midwife attends the mother. Birth creates two patients, though no one in the room would use that language. Their needs compete and overlap. The mother wants to know whether the child lives. The child needs warmth and milk. The mother may need pressure on her belly, attention to bleeding, help delivering the afterbirth, or simply a moment not to faint. A safe system would have enough trained hands for both. A colonial household had whoever could be gathered before dawn. That meant triage happened through instinct, experience and urgency. The mother might hear her baby cry and not be able to hold it yet. She might ask if it was a boy or a girl, whether it was whole, whether it looked strong, whether it would live. The answers might come quickly if things looked well. If the child was weak, the answers could become evasive, not out of cruelty, but because people feared speaking death into the room before they had to. The baby's sex mattered, but perhaps not always in the simple way people imagine. A son could carry a family name, inherit land, and represent future labour. A daughter could also be deeply wanted, especially in a household that understood the value of women's work, though legal and social structures favoured males in many ways. In that first hour, however, the most important fact was not boy or girl. It was life. The child had to breathe, warm, and feed. Everything else could wait. Feeding was the next test, and it was more dangerous than modern abundance allows us to feel. A newborn needed to suck. The first milk, colostrum, thick and yellowish, was not always understood in the same way we understand it now. In some cultures and periods, early milk was valued. In others, there were suspicions or practices that delayed nursing. In colonial households, breastfeeding was common and often necessary, though advice and custom varied. If the mother could put the baby to breast and the infant latched, this was a good sign. It meant strength in the baby and the possibility of nourishment. It also helped the mother, because nursing could encourage the womb to contract, reducing bleeding, though no one would describe the hormone process as modern medicine does. They may have known by experience that putting the baby to the breast helped the mother's body settle. But nursing could fail. A baby born weak might not suck. A mother who had lost blood might be too faint to hold the child. Milk might be delayed. Nipples could crack. Infection could enter. A premature infant might be too small or tired to feed effectively. There were no bottles with sterile formula, no neonatal feeding tubes, no lactation consultants, no pasteurized donor milk. If the mother could not nurse, the household had to find another woman with milk. A wet nurse might be a relative, neighbour, servant, or enslaved woman depending on region and circumstance. That solution carried its own social and moral complexities. In enslaved households, the milk of enslaved women could be controlled by enslavers, sometimes diverted to white infants at the expense of enslaved women's own children, a cruelty that must not be softened. Among poorer families, finding milk could depend on whether another mother nearby had enough to share. Animal milk might be used in some cases, but feeding an infant safely without modern sanitation was extremely difficult. Milk spoiled. Containers carried contamination. Babies developed diarrhea and died. So the first attempt to nurse was not only a tender image, it was a test of whether this child had access to the one food most likely to keep it alive. The room may watch that first feeding more intensely than we would expect. Does the baby root? Does it open its mouth? Does it grasp the nipple? Does it swallow? Does it tire too quickly? The mother, exhausted and sore, may wince as the infant latches. Her body has just delivered a child, and now another demand begins immediately. If the baby sucks well, someone may say so with relief. If it does not, the midwife or an older woman may try to help, adjusting the baby's head, expressing a little milk, urging patience. The mother may feel fear rising again. A baby who cannot feed is not safe, and she knows it. She may have seen a child weaken over days, growing sleepy, cold, and quiet. The first hour contains the seed of those later fears. A strong cry is good. Warmth is good. A latch is good. But each good sign must be followed by another. That is how infant survival worked. Not one miracle, but a chain of small continuations. Breath followed by warmth. Warmth followed by sucking. Sucking followed by sleep. Sleep followed by waking again. Waking followed by more feeding. Every step mattered. Spiritual danger was considered alongside physical danger. In many Christian communities, especially Anglican, Catholic and some others, The baptism of a frail newborn could become urgent if the child seemed unlikely to live. In Puritan New England, the theology around baptism differed from Catholic sacramental urgency, but the infant's soul still mattered intensely. Prayer over the child was not ornamental. It was part of the first hour because death in the first hour was possible. If the baby was weak, the room's attention might divide between attempts to warm and revive the body and pleas for mercy over the soul. A modern hospital often hides death behind procedure. A colonial birth room could not. If a baby was dying, it died in the same room where it was born, near the mother if she was conscious, in the arms of a woman who might still be stained with the birth. The boundary between delivery and mourning could be only minutes wide. That is why people sometimes moved quickly to name, pray, baptize where appropriate, or at least speak the child into the world before it left. A baby who lived 1 hour had existed. A baby who never fed, never opened its eyes, never saw daylight still mattered to the people who had waited for it. Records might later reduce that child to a line or omit it entirely. The room did not omit it. It felt the weight, however briefly. Naming practices varied, but names carried family memory, religious meaning, and hope. A newborn might be named after a parent, grandparent, deceased sibling, biblical figure, patron, or respected neighbour. Sometimes a name was decided before birth. Sometimes it waited. In a world where babies died often, names could be repeated after loss, a practice that can feel startling now. A family might give a later child the name of a baby who had died, not because the first child had been forgotten, but because names belong to family continuity as much as individual identity. In that first hour, if the child looked fragile, the urgency of naming could sharpen. Who is this child before God? Before the household? Before death, if death comes quickly? The answer mattered. It mattered enough that people spoke names over bodies that might not live until sunset. The baby's body would be examined, though not with the detached thoroughness of a modern newborn exam. The midwife or attending women would look for obvious signs. Are the limbs formed? Is the mouth whole? Does the spine seem sound? Are there visible deformities? Does the child pass urine or stool? Is the belly swollen? Does the breathing sound clear or wet? Some conditions could be seen, many could not. A heart defect might remain hidden until the baby turned blue during feeding. Infection might appear later. Prematurity might be obvious if the child was very small, but there was little to be done beyond warmth, feeding attempts, and hope. Twins, if present, brought additional danger and surprise. Sometimes the second baby was known or suspected, sometimes not. A mother might deliver one child and then the midwife realise another remained, turning relief back into labour. For the first newborn, a twin birth could mean less strength, less warmth, less milk, and a more exhausted mother. Multiple births in this period were frightening because every risk multiplied. The mother could bleed more, the babies could be smaller, the labour could become complicated. If both lived, the household faced the practical problem of feeding and keeping two fragile infants alive. The room that rejoiced over one cry might have to return instantly to work for another. Swaddling the baby was both practical and symbolic. The small body, so loose and startling after birth, was wrapped into order. A cap or cloth might cover the head if available. The infant might be laid near the mother or in a cradle, though many families used whatever sleeping arrangement they had. Cradles existed, but not every household had a fine wooden one. A baby might sleep in a simple cradle, a box, a drawer-like bed, a basket, or beside the mother depending on means and custom. Each arrangement carried risk. Near the mother meant warmth and access to breastfeeding, but if she was exhausted beyond awareness, co-sleeping could be dangerous. Away from her meant cold might be a problem. A cradle near the hearth had warmth but also smoke, sparks, and uneven heat. There were no safety standards for infant furniture, no warnings about soft bedding, no modern understanding of sudden infant death. suffocation risk or safe sleep environments. Families learn through custom and loss. Some losses they could explain, some they could not. A baby found dead after seeming well might be understood through overlaying, weakness, divine will, bad air, or other explanations available at the time. The deep uncertainty around infant death haunted households because the danger did not always leave clues. The first hour also brought the question of who was allowed to see the child. The father might be called in after the mother was covered and the worst mess had been managed, depending on the household and the urgency of the moment. He may enter awkwardly, emotionally restrained, perhaps more frightened by tenderness than by blood. A man in 1690 may have been trained to command his household, but a newborn could undo that command instantly. He might look first to the midwife's face to learn whether he was supposed to rejoice or fear. He might look at his wife, pale and exhausted, and understand that the child had come at a cost he had heard but not borne. He might be handed the baby briefly, or simply shown the wrapped bundle. If the child was a son, someone may say it. If a daughter, someone may say that too. But if the baby is weak, the words may be quieter. The father's joy could be held back by the room's caution. In colonial households, fathers had legal and spiritual authority over children, but the first hour of a baby's life belonged largely to women. Women caught the child, wiped it, wrapped it, judged it, helped it feed, and decided whether the mother could hold it safely. Male authority waited at the threshold while female labour made the child presentable to the household and the world. Older children, if nearby, might be kept away at first, not necessarily out of modern ideas of emotional protection, but because they were underfoot, noisy, or likely to bring cold air, dirt, or disorder into a room that needed control. But small houses made secrecy difficult. They may hear the cry. They may hear women laughing softly or crying. They may hear the father told. A daughter might be allowed to peek or help. A son might be sent to fetch wood or carry a message to a neighbour. If the baby lives, the household has changed. There is another mouth, another soul, another future worker perhaps, another claim on the mother's body and the family's stores. If the baby dies, the children may learn that by silence. Colonial childhood often included such knowledge early. Babies arrived and vanished. Mothers went to bed pregnant and did not always rise. A newborn's first hour was not hidden away from the family's understanding of life and death. It educated everyone, whether anyone intended it or not. The baby's skin was another sign. A vigorous infant might turn from bluish or dusky at birth toward pinker colour with crying and warmth. A weak infant might remain pale, grey or blue, worrying the women, but firelight could distort colour. Dawn could be dim. Smoke could redden eyes. A baby's true condition might be hard to read. Breathing mattered more. Was it regular? Was it gasping? Did the chest pull strangely? Did the baby grunt? Did it stop crying and become too quiet? A quiet newborn could be a peaceful newborn, or it could be a failing one. Experience taught women to distrust some kinds of quiet. A baby who would not wake to feed, whose limbs felt limp, whose mouth did not search, whose skin cooled despite wrapping, was in danger. Yet there was little to do beyond keeping it warm, trying to feed, stimulating, praying and watching. Watching was care. It sounds passive now because we live in a world that prizes intervention, but in 1690 watching was often the main medical act available. To watch was to notice early enough to try the few things one could try. To watch was to refuse to let a fragile life slip away unobserved. If the baby seemed strong, the women might begin cleaning more confidently. The midwife could finish tending the mother, tie up what needed tying, arrange cloths, and perhaps give instructions for the next hours. Keep the mother warm, let her rest, watch the bleeding, put the baby to breast. Do not let the room chill. Call if fever comes. Keep the cord clean. The exact instructions varied, but the themes were practical. Warmth, feeding, bleeding, cleanliness as they understood it, and watchfulness. The first hour was the beginning of a longer vigil. Many infants who survived delivery died in the days and weeks afterward from infection, prematurity, feeding failure, diarrhea, respiratory illness, cold, or conditions no one could treat. Infant mortality was high enough that hope itself had to be disciplined. Parents loved babies, but they also lived in a world that repeatedly taught them not every cradle would remain full. This did not mean they were indifferent. That is another modern mistake. People in the past did not love children less because children died more often. Often they feared loving under the shadow of loss, or expressed grief in religious language that can look restrained to us. The loss was real. A baby who died after an hour could leave a mother with milk coming in for a child no longer there. That physical grief is rarely recorded and almost unbearable to consider. For enslaved newborns, the first hour unfolded under the shadow of law and violence. A child born to an enslaved woman inherited the condition of the mother in colonies shaped by hereditary slavery. That meant a baby's first breath could be, in the eyes of the law, the arrival of another person claimed as property. But inside the birth space, among the mother and the women who cared for her, the child was not property. The child was flesh, kin, future, fear, and love. The contradiction was brutal. Enslaved women developed and preserved birth knowledge, nursing practices, healing traditions, and forms of mutual care under conditions designed to deny them control over their own bodies and children. The newborn's first hour in such a setting might include the same urgent needs for warmth, breath, and milk, but layered with dangers free families did not face in the same way. Forced labour after birth, separation, inadequate rest, surveillance, and the knowledge that the child's life would be shaped by bondage. To speak of colonial birth without this would make the room too narrow and too clean. Colonial America contained many birth rooms, and some were built inside systems of cruelty that turned reproduction itself into exploitation. Indigenous newborns also entered worlds that European records often misunderstood. Native communities had their own birth practices, kin networks, postpartum customs, and infant care traditions, many of which were more coherent and effective than colonists recognised. European observers frequently judged what they saw through prejudice, missing the knowledge embedded in Indigenous women's care. By 1690, many Indigenous communities were already facing the devastation of disease, war, displacement, and colonial pressure, all of which affected birth and infant survival. So when we imagine a newborn in colonial America, we should not imagine only one English room by one hearth. The English colonial house is the room we are standing in for this story, but beyond it were many other women, many other first cries, many other forms of knowledge, and many other dangers created by the violent expansion of the colonies themselves. Within the English household, after the baby's first signs are judged, there may be a small ritual of household recognition. The child might be shown to the mother again, placed near her, or tucked into the crook of her arm if she can hold safely. She may be too weak to show the joy people expect. That does not mean she feels none. Exhaustion can flatten the face. Blood loss can make emotion distant. Pain can make even happiness difficult to express. She may look at the child with shock more than tenderness at first. This baby has been inside her for months, has nearly torn her apart to arrive, and now exists as a separate creature making sounds in the air. That transition is enormous even in a safe modern room. In 1690 it happens while danger still sits at the edge of the bed. The mother might count fingers if she has strength. She might touch the baby's head. She might ask again whether it is well. She might ask for the child to be brought closer, then be unable to lift her arms. A neighbour woman may guide the baby to her breast because the mother's hands are shaking too badly. The first hour is full of such small humiliations and mercies. A woman who has just done the hardest physical work of her life may need someone else to hold a cup to her mouth. This dependence was not weakness. It was the natural aftermath of an ordeal that had no pain relief and no guarantee. The baby's crying, if strong and persistent, might become almost funny after the terror of silence has passed. Someone may say the child has lungs. Someone may laugh because the alternative is weeping. The sound that everyone begged for can quickly become the sound that fills the room with new demands. A crying baby must be warmed, fed, settled. A crying baby wakes siblings. A crying baby makes the mother's body respond. The house begins to reorganize around the smallest person in it. Yet the newborn is not only a joy. In a subsistence household, another child means another mouth before it means another pair of hands. The family must feed the mother well enough for milk. The mother must recover enough to nurse. Cloth must be washed. Firewood must stretch. Sleep will be broken. Older children may be tasked with more work. A baby is love, but also labour. Colonial families understood this without apology. They could rejoice in a child and immediately begin the work the child required. That work begins in the first hour with drying, wrapping, feeding, warming, watching, and naming the baby as someone who has entered the household's obligations as well as its affections. If the child is weak, the first hour becomes a vigil instead of a welcome. The women may not lay the baby far from the fire. They may take turns holding it inside warmed cloth. They may drip a little milk or sugared liquid or other preparation into the mouth depending on belief, though such efforts could help little or harm. They may try to rouse it again and again. The mother may be told to rest, but she listens for every sound. The room's attention may become painfully divided. The midwife watches the mother's bleeding, while another woman watches the baby's breathing. Two fragile lives, one bed, one fire, one household, no safety net. A weak newborn could live a few minutes, then an hour, then perhaps until evening, each extension of time creating hope and dread together. The family might not know whether to prepare for life or death, so it prepares for both in the old practical way. Keep the child warm, keep cloth ready, pray, send word if needed. Do not speak too loudly, do not leave the mother alone, do not let the fire fall. The ordinary tasks of survival and the emotional tasks of waiting become indistinguishable. There is a moment, perhaps near the end of that first hour, when the room may begin to settle if both mother and baby appear stable. The child has cried, warmed, latched, or at least tried to latch. The mother's bleeding has not turned catastrophic. The afterbirth has come. The midwife's face has lost some of its tightness. The other women begin to move more slowly. Someone adjusts the mother's blanket. Someone carries away the worst of the soiled cloths. Someone opens the door briefly to let out smoke and the heavy smell of birth, then closes it quickly against the cold. The father may step in again. The older children may be told they have a brother or sister. A kettle may be set for a strengthening drink. The baby, wrapped tightly, may finally grow quiet in a way that seems restful rather than dangerous. In a modern story, this is where the scene would soften. The camera would linger on the mother's face, the newborn's cheek, the family gathered. But in this older room, the women do not surrender fully to softness yet. They know the next hours matter. They know the mother can bleed again. They know fever may come. They know the baby may fail to feed. They know the cord must be watched, the skin kept warm, the cries interpreted, the mother's milk encouraged, the household kept running around a woman who should not be asked to rise too soon but may be needed before she's ready. The first hour has not made them safe. It has only carried them into the next kind of danger. That is the pattern of birth in this world. One threshold opens into another. The baby lies near the mother now or in the arms of a woman close by, wrapped so tightly that only the small face shows. The face may be red, wrinkled, swollen from birth, not the perfect infant face later portraits pretend. The head may be moulded from the passage through the pelvis. There may be marks, bruising, vernix, blood in the hair, a cry that rises and fades unevenly. The mother may be too tired to care how the child looks. It lives. That is enough for the moment. The midwife continues to notice what others miss. The strength of the cry, the warmth of the skin, the smell of the cord, the mother's colour. The amount of blood, the room's temperature, the supply of clean cloth. Her work is not finished because birth has no single finish. The newborn's first hour has been survived by breath, warmth, women's hands, and luck. The room has done what it can with what it has, and what it has is painfully little compared with what danger can demand. The child has entered a world where safety is not a system but a series of watchful acts repeated by tired people. Keep the fire alive, keep the baby close, keep the mother from bleeding, keep the cloths clean enough, keep prayer moving through the room because there is still so much no one can control. And while the baby's breathing settles into the small uneven rhythm of new life, the mother begins the next part of the ordeal, the part history most often hides behind the word recovery, as if surviving the birth meant her body, her work, and her place in the household could simply return by morning. After the baby has cried, after the cord has been tied, after the afterbirth has been examined and the bleeding seems to have slowed, the room does not return to ordinary life as quickly as the records make it seem. That is one of the quiet tricks of history. A line in a family Bible might say that a child was born on a certain day. A town record might preserve a baptism. A husband's diary might note that his wife was delivered of a son or daughter, and that both were well, or that the Lord had seen fit to take one of them. The sentence is short. The reality was not. The mother lying in the bed or on the pallet has not simply finished an event. Her body has been opened, stretched, bruised, perhaps torn, emptied of blood and strength, and then immediately handed a newborn whose survival depends on her warmth, milk, and continued life. The women around her know that the worst visible crisis may have passed, but they do not behave as though safety has arrived. They watch the bed. They watch the cloth beneath her. They watch her face. They watch whether her eyes focus when someone speaks. They notice if she grows cold, if her lips pale, if the bleeding begins again, if her belly feels wrong beneath the midwife's hand. Recovery in 1690 was not a clean period after danger. It was danger continuing in a quieter form. A mother could survive the labour and die in the days after. She could escape heavy bleeding and be taken by fever. She could deliver a healthy child and then become too weak to nurse it. She could be told to rest while hearing the ordinary sounds of a household that still needed her. The scrape of a pot, a child asking for food, the door opening to cold air, the fire needing wood, the newborn beginning to cry again before she has slept for even an hour. The word recovery can make this sound passive, as if the body naturally repairs itself while the mother lies still. In a colonial home, recovery had to be defended. It had to be made possible by other people, other women most often, because the work of the household did not disappear when the mother could no longer do it. Someone had to cook. Someone had to tend the fire. Someone had to wash the birth cloths if they could be saved. Someone had to manage the older children. Someone had to feed animals, carry water, keep the room warm, prepare food for the mother, and make sure the baby was put to the breast. If there were female relatives nearby, the mother's chances of rest improved. If neighbours were generous and available, help came through the door in the form of food, hands, and knowledge. If she was isolated, poor, enslaved, indentured, or living in a household without enough support, the idea of lying still could become almost impossible. The body might need days, the household might grant hours. That difference mattered. The custom of lying in existed in many communities, and it is worth understanding because it was one of the few formal acknowledgements that childbirth left a woman physically vulnerable. A woman might remain in bed or close to the bed for a period after delivery, sometimes days, sometimes weeks, depending on custom, health, class, religion, and available help. Visitors, usually women, might come to see her, bring food, offer congratulations, exchange news, and assist with the newborn. In wealthier households, lying in could be surrounded by more ceremony and comfort, with better bedding, more food, servants, and a longer pause before ordinary duties returned. In an ordinary farmhouse or small settlement home, It was simpler and more practical. The mother needed warmth, nourishment, clean cloth, help with nursing, and protection from overwork. She might be given strengthening drinks, broths, porridges, caudles, or whatever the household believed would restore her. Caudle, a warm drink often made with ale or wine, eggs, spices, bread, or gruel, depending on recipe and means, was commonly associated with sickness and childbirth in the English world. It was meant to strengthen, warm, and comfort. To modern taste, some versions might seem strange, but in a room where a woman had lost blood and heat, something warm, sweetened if possible, and easy to swallow could feel like care. Food after birth was not only about appetite, it was medicine in the household sense. It was the body being coaxed back toward usefulness and survival. But even this care could be limited by scarcity. A family in late winter might not have eggs to spare. Sugar might be expensive. Wine or spices might be unavailable. The mother's recovery depended not only on kindness, but on the stores in the house. The first day after birth could feel deceptively calm if both mother and child were alive. The baby might sleep in short stretches, wrapped tightly near the mother or in a cradle or basket close to the hearth. The mother might drift in and out of sleep, waking to cramps, bleeding, soreness, thirst, or the infant's cry. Her womb continued to contract, and those afterpains could be sharp, especially if she had borne children before. Nursing could intensify them. Each time the baby suckled, the mother might feel the deep internal grip of the uterus tightening, a painful but important process that helped reduce bleeding. No one in 1690 understood the hormones involved, but women knew from experience that nursing and the mother's recovery were connected. The baby at the breast was not only being fed, the mother's body was being urged to close. That did not make it comfortable. A woman who had expected relief after delivery might find herself wincing with every feeding. Her nipples could crack. Her breasts could swell painfully as milk came in. If milk did not come well, panic could grow quickly. A newborn's hunger was not a small problem. It was an immediate threat. The baby cried, rooted, weakened, or slept too heavily, and each sign had to be interpreted. The mother might blame herself if the baby could not feed. The women around her might offer advice, reposition the child, express milk, bring another nursing woman, or use substitutes that carried risk. Recovery for the mother was inseparable from the newborn survival. Her body was not allowed to belong only to itself after birth. It became the child's food source, heat source, and comfort, even while it was damaged and exhausted. Blood remained part of the mother's life for days or weeks. Postpartum bleeding, called lochia in modern medical language, was expected, but too much bleeding remained frightening. The women might check the cloths beneath her, or ask how heavily she was flowing. They might not speak of it in technical terms, but they knew that bleeding should change, slow, and lose its force. A sudden return of heavy blood could send the room back into alarm. There was no quick trip to a hospital. The same midwife might be called again, walking the same path, entering the same room, this time with the baby already born and the mother perhaps too weak to lift her head. The remedies were limited. Pressure, position, warmth, herbal preparations, prayer, and the hope that the womb would tighten. If the mother survived, the event might later be folded into a phrase like, "She had a hard time." Those words could conceal hours of terror. A hard time might mean a long labour, heavy bleeding, fever, tearing, a dead infant, or a mother who nearly died. People used ordinary language for extraordinary suffering because they had to keep living beside it. The fear of fever began almost at once, though it often took time to show itself. A mother might be watched for chills, heat, foul-smelling discharge, belly pain, delirium, or weakness that worsened instead of improving. The women did not understand bacterial infection, but they understood patterns of decline. The mother who seemed grateful and tired on the first day might be burning by the third. She might shake with chills even under blankets. She might complain that the room was too hot, then too cold. Her belly might become tender. She might turn restless, then confused. If her mind wandered, the fear in the room deepened. Fever after birth was not mysterious in the sense of being unfamiliar. It was familiar in the way that made people dread it. They had seen it. They had seen a woman delivered safely, then buried before she could regain strength. They had seen babies left motherless after everyone thought the birth had gone well, without antibiotics, without antiseptic practice, without understanding of the invisible causes. Postpartum infection could not be reliably stopped. The mother's survival depended on her body's ability to fight, the severity of the infection, the care available, and luck. That word appears again and again in this history because it belongs there. Skill mattered, cleanliness mattered, community mattered. But luck still stood in the room. Rest was treated as necessary, but not always as possible. A mother with support might stay in bed while other women managed the household. She might be kept warm, fed, and shielded from drafts because many people believed cold air after birth could be dangerous. The room might remain close and smoky because warmth was considered protective. If the bedding grew damp from sweat or blood, changing it required effort and spare linen. If there were not enough clean cloths, compromise entered recovery the way it entered everything else. The mother might lie on fabric that was clean enough by household standards but not safe by ours. The baby might be wrapped in cloth that had been washed but not sterilized. Hands might be rinsed but not disinfected. The room could look orderly and still be full of unseen risk. At the same time, the mother's need for rest could conflict with beliefs about discipline, duty, and female endurance. Women were expected to bear what came to them. Complaining too much could be frowned upon in some households. A mother might minimize pain because she did not want to seem weak. She might hide bleeding until it became serious. She might rise too soon because she heard a child crying, or because no one else knew how to prepare a meal properly, or because the family could not afford for her to remain still. The body's limits and the household's needs negotiated with each other, and the body did not always win. For enslaved women, recovery could be even more constrained. Their births occurred within a system that claimed ownership over their labour, and, in many colonies, over the children they bore. An enslaved mother's need to heal could be subordinated to the demands of an enslaver. She might receive care from other enslaved women whose knowledge and tenderness were real, but those women themselves worked under coercion. She might be expected to return to labour before her body was ready. Her milk might be demanded for another child. Her own infant's survival could be threatened by overwork, poor nutrition, separation, or lack of control over time and rest. The violence of slavery entered recovery not only through dramatic cruelty, but through ordinary denial of bodily authority. To need rest and not be allowed, it is a form of danger. To produce milk and not control who receives it is a form of theft. To give birth to a child whose future can be claimed by someone else is a grief that begins before the first hour has ended. Any account of colonial recovery that imagines only a free woman lying in bed among neighbours leaves too many mothers outside the room. Their recoveries were also history, even when the records describe them only as labour, property or numbers. For free women too, the period after birth was shaped by law, religion, and social expectation. In some Christian traditions, the mother's eventual return to church after childbirth carried ritual significance. The English practice, often called churching, gave thanks for a woman's safe delivery and marked her return to public worship. In Puritan New England, attitudes and practices differed, and the ceremony did not hold the same place in every community, but the larger idea remained. Childbirth placed a woman in a distinct state, physically and spiritually, and recovery included re-entry into the ordered life of church and household. Before that return, she might be visited at home. Women's visiting during lying in could create a rare social space centred on the mother. Food, gossip, advice, stories of other births, warnings, laughter, and grief could all move through these visits. The lying-in room could be a place where women told the truth in ways they did not in front of men. They could compare labours. They could name a midwife's skill. They could speak of sore breasts, heavy bleeding, weak babies, and fears that would sound improper elsewhere. We should not romanticize this. Not every woman was surrounded by kindness. Not every visitor was helpful. Advice could be judgmental. A mother who struggled to nurse might feel blamed. A woman who delivered a stillborn child might receive theological explanations that comforted some and wounded others. But the visiting mattered because recovery was not meant to be faced entirely alone, at least when the community functioned as it should. The older children in the household had their own adjustment. Their mother, who had been the centre of daily order, was suddenly in bed and not to be disturbed, except that children disturb by existing. A toddler might not understand why he cannot climb onto her. A little girl might be told to bring water, sit quietly, help with the baby, or take on tasks beyond her years. A boy might be sent outside with chores to keep him away from the sick room. If the mother was weak, older daughters often became temporary little women of the house. They might watch younger siblings stir food, fetch cloth, and observe their mother's suffering with a seriousness that entered their own understanding of womanhood. This is how knowledge travelled, not through formal lessons, but through being present when the body and household made demands. A girl who saw her mother bleed, nurse, cry quietly from pain, and then rise too soon because the work required it, learned something about the expectations waiting for her. She might not have words for injustice or endurance. She simply learned the shape of the life. If the mother recovered well, her strength returned gradually. She might sit up, then stand, then cross the room, then resume small tasks while someone told her not to overdo it, though overdoing it was often defined by necessity rather than medicine. Her bleeding slowed, her appetite returned, her milk established if nursing went well. The baby began to seem more firmly attached to the world. The room lost the smell of birth. The soiled cloths were washed, boiled if possible, dried, folded, repurposed, or discarded if ruined beyond use. The bed was remade. The fire returned to its ordinary management. The midwife came or sent word. Neighbours stopped speaking in low tones. The father resumed his routines. The older children adjusted to the baby's crying. Little by little, the extraordinary event became part of ordinary life. This transition could be a relief, but it also helped hide what had happened. Once the mother was back at the hearth, back with the needle, back with the baby at her breast while giving instructions to children and keeping one eye on the pot, the household could treat the danger as past. Her body might remember longer. Every time she sat, lifted, nursed, or walked, she might feel the birth. If she had torn, the pain might remain. If she had lost blood, weakness might follow her for weeks. If she feared the next pregnancy, that fear might live quietly beneath daily work. No record would necessarily mention any of this. The world counted the baby. It counted the baptism. It counted the father's household. It rarely counted the mother's private cost. If the mother did not recover, the house entered another kind of waiting. Fever, hemorrhage, or decline after birth could turn a room of congratulation into a death watch. The newborn still needed feeding. That fact is almost unbearable. A mother could be dying while her baby rooted and cried beside her. If she could not nurse, another woman had to be found. The father, even if grieving, had to think practically. Who has milk? Who can come? Who can care for the older children? If the mother sensed she was dying, her thoughts may have gone to her soul, her husband, her baby, the children who still needed her, the household stores, the work unfinished, and the women standing nearby who knew too well what was happening. A minister might be called. Prayers might fill the room again, different from the prayers of labour. These were not prayers asking the body to open and deliver. These were prayers asking God to spare her or receive her. A woman might give instructions if she was lucid. She might ask that the baby be cared for, that certain children be watched, that a piece of clothing go to a daughter, that debts or small household matters be remembered. Or she might have no such moment. Fever could take speech. Blood loss could take consciousness. Death in childbed could be quick or slow, public in the small circle of the room and yet almost invisible later in the written record. When a mother died, the language around it often softened the brutality. She died in childbed. She was taken after delivery. She departed this life. She left a disconsolate husband and several small children. These phrases are not false, but they are incomplete. They do not show the newborn searching for milk. They do not show the older child asking when mother will get up. They do not show the neighbour women washing the body they had tried to help through birth. They do not show the bed stripped, the burial cloth prepared, the cradle still near the hearth. They do not show the midwife walking home with another memory she cannot put down. They do not show the widower looking at a baby whose life has cost the life of the woman who bore it. Even if no one would say it that way, maternal death created practical urgency. A household with small children needed care. Widowers often remarried quickly by modern emotional standards, sometimes within months, because survival demanded adult female labour. This did not necessarily mean the first wife was unloved. It meant the household system had no empty place for grief to remain undisturbed. Someone had to cook, someone had to nurse or arrange nursing, someone had to mend, wash, garden, preserve, discipline and keep children alive. The speed of remarriage can look cold until we understand the dependency built into the household. The dead woman's importance was proved by how quickly life became unmanageable without her. If the baby died and the mother lived, recovery carried another kind of silence. Her body still behaved as if there were a baby. Milk came in, her breast swelled and ached. The womb cramped, bleeding continued. She lay in the same bed, recovering from the same ordeal, but the child who had caused the labour was gone. People might comfort her with religious language, telling her the child was with God, that providence was wise, that she must submit. Some women may have found real comfort in those beliefs. Others may have suffered under them. Grief does not become simpler, because theology is strong. A mother might be expected to accept the loss, regain strength, and prepare eventually for another pregnancy. The physical evidence of the baby remained in her body after the baby was buried. That kind of grief rarely appears in the records. A stillborn child might not be named in a way that survived. An infant who lived a day might appear only briefly. The mother's sorrow might vanish entirely behind the next recorded birth. History often follows the children who lived because they produced descendants and documents. The children who died took their mother's milk, labour, pain and grief with them into silence. Surviving birth could also mark a woman socially. She had proved fertility. She had entered or re-entered the community of mothers. In a world where a woman's status was deeply tied to marriage, household labour and childbearing, the successful delivery of a child mattered beyond the private family. It affected inheritance, labour, reputation, and religious community. But the honour was complicated. Motherhood brought status and burden together. A woman might be praised for a safe delivery, then expected to bear another child within a year or two. Repeated pregnancies were physically draining. Nutritional stress, breastfeeding, miscarriages, stillbirths, and hard labour between pregnancies could wear down the body. There was no reliable contraception for most women, and refusing marital relations was not generally within a wife's legal or social power. A mother recovering in 1690 might know, even while holding a newborn, that this ordeal could happen again. That knowledge sat quietly beneath the relief. Survival was not release from the system, it was continuation inside it. The midwife's role after the birth could continue through visits or advice. She might check the mother, help with breastfeeding, watch the infant, treat soreness, recommend foods or remedies, and reassure the household when signs seemed normal. Her authority did not end the moment she left the birth room, though it became less visible. She may have known which mothers needed more watching. She may have worried about a woman who looked too pale, or a baby who seemed too weak, or a household with too little help. but her ability to intervene remained limited. A midwife could advise rest, but she could not create more food. She could urge cleanliness, but she could not create sterile conditions. She could recognize fever, but she could not produce antibiotics. Her knowledge was personal, practical, and sometimes life-saving, but it operated inside a world that constrained every good intention. This is why blaming the past too simply misses the point. Many women were doing careful, intelligent work with inadequate tools. They did not fail because they lacked concern. They were trapped by the limits of their time. As days passed, the room became less of a sick room if recovery went well. The baby's cries joined the household's normal sounds. The mother might sit with the child bundled tightly at her breast while giving instructions from the bed. The smell of birth faded into smoke, food, wool, milk, and ordinary human closeness. Visitors came and went. News spread through the settlement. A child had been born. The mother was mending. The baby was thriving, or weak, or not expected to live, or taken by God. This news travelled through women first, then households, then church and town record. The event became public in pieces. Yet the most intimate parts remained with those who were there. The hand squeezed during transition. The moment the baby did not breathe. The cloths filling with blood. The mother whispering that she was afraid. The midwife saying, "Again," when everyone knew there was almost no strength left. These things were not usually preserved. They lived in memory until memory died. That silence is one of the reasons this history matters. The lives of colonial women are often reconstructed from records that were not designed to honour them. Wills list clothing. Church records list baptisms and deaths. Court records mention women when something goes wrong legally or socially. Diaries, when they exist, often compress domestic labour into brief lines. A woman's work could fill every waking hour and leave almost no written trace. Childbirth, one of the most dangerous events of her life, might be recorded only by the child's name. The mother becomes the passage through which the recorded person arrived. Her pain is assumed, then ignored. Her recovery is necessary, then uncounted. Her survival is treated as ordinary unless she dies. And if she dies, she may become a warning, a sermon example, a line in a burial register, or the unnamed first wife before the second marriage. The silence is not empty. It is crowded with women whose names we may never know. To sit with this history is not to say that every colonial birth was horror from beginning to end. Some births were quick. Some mothers recovered well. Some babies thrived. Some women were surrounded by skilled, loving care, and remembered their lying in as a time of female companionship, food, rest, and relief. It matters to say that because people in the past had joy too. A mother could laugh when the baby finally cried. A grandmother could hold a newborn with real delight. A father could be proud. Children could marvel at the tiny face in the blankets. Neighbour women could leave the house tired and happy because this time death had stayed outside. The point is not that birth was only suffering. The point is that joy stood much closer to danger than most of us are used to. Relief had blood on its hands. Gratitude came after fear. A healthy child in the cradle was not merely cute or expected. It was evidence that many things had gone right in a world where they could easily go wrong. By the end of the first week, if the mother was still alive, if the fever had not come, if the bleeding had slowed, if the baby was feeding, the household could begin to believe in survival more fully, not completely. Infant life remained fragile for months. The mother's strength might still be uncertain. But the first great dangers had begun to recede. The midwife's visits became less urgent. The neighbours returned to their own work. The father resumed the rhythm of farm, shop, church, or trade. The mother, still sore and tired, gradually re-entered the labour that defined her place in the household. The baby might be baptised, named publicly, entered into the religious and social life of the community. The birth became a story, and like most stories people have to live with, it was simplified. A hard labour, a fine child, a narrow escape, a mercy, a loss. The long hours became phrases, the phrases became memory, the memory became silence. And this is where we leave the room, not because the story has truly ended, but because the ordinary day has reclaimed it. The fire still has to be tended. The newborn still has to be fed. The mother still has to heal in a bed that belongs to a working household, not a hospital. Outside, the path the midwife walked before dawn is visible now in daylight, ordinary again, as if nothing happened on it. The neighbours who came through the dark have gone back to their own hearths. The cloths have been rinsed, or burned, or set aside. The cradle is near the bed. The mother sleeps if the baby allows it. Her body carries the evidence of what the record may never say. In 1690, giving birth was not a single dramatic moment, but a chain of risks, and surviving it required pain, help, luck, endurance, and the labour of women whose hands held families together without being counted as medicine, law, or history. Tonight, when you look at a light switch, a clean towel, a glass of water, a bottle of medicine, a phone within reach, or the simple fact that help can come when called, it is worth remembering that for countless mothers in colonial America, the distance between life and death was crossed in a hot room by firelight, with no pain relief, no true safety, and no promise that anyone would write down what it cost.